and a quorum is present, so I will call this meeting of the Madison Plan Commission of December 11th to order. First, we will hear from our technical facilitator, Jesse Poole. Jesse?
All right, welcome to our Plan Commission meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling on the number in your original email. To members and city staff members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak or ask questions. Staff, click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do the best to call on committee members in the order in which their hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After all register and speak, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed in today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jesse. First, we'll do communications, disclosures, and recusals. Members of the body should make any required disclosures or recusals under the city's ethics code. Are there any communications, disclosures, or recusals? Seeing no raised hands, we'll go to agenda item 1, which is public comment period. And I don't believe we have any public comments this morning. I mean, this evening. Thank you, Heather. Um, Moving on then to the minutes of November 27th. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing no raised hands, is there a motion to approve? Moved by Commissioner Heck and seconded by Alder Duncan. And I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Motion passes unanimously. Next, we'll go to schedule of meetings. Our next regular meetings are January 8th and 22nd, and then again, February 25th and 26th, and those will all be virtual meetings starting at 5:30. Next is our consent agenda. It is the custom of the Plan Commission to remove from the agenda those items on which the staff believes an application has had sufficient review to warrant approval with all of the conditions placed upon it by various city departments, on which the applicant accepts those conditions, and there are no individuals who have registered to speak in opposition to the item. So those items are placed on the consent agenda and are addressed at the beginning of our meeting. And then people interested in those items could leave or stay if they would like to. Then the rest of the items will be taken in a regular course of business. So I'll just first read the agenda items and then I'll come back and read the items into the record. So the items that are proposed for the consent agenda are agenda item 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7. And then for referral, also on the consent agenda, agenda items 8, 9, 10, and 11. Are there any requests for separation? Seeing no raised hands, I will read the items into the record. So agenda item 2, Legistar 80803, amending various sections of chapter 28 of the Madison General Ordinances related to zoning codes to fix minor edits. Agenda item 3, Legistar 80828, which is to change the zoning of property located at 118 State Street from Planned Development District to Downtown Core District in Alder District 4. And then agenda items 5 through 7 are related. Legistar 8043, located 29 South Mill Street in Alder District 13, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a community center. Legistar 80829 is to change the zoning from campus institutional district to traditional shopping street district. Legistar 80431 is consideration of a conditional use for dwelling units in a mixed-use building containing 49 to 60 units, consideration of a conditional use for indoor recreation for a building taller than 4 stories and 60 feet in height to allow construction of a 6-story mixed-use building containing a 16,300 square foot community center and gymnasium and 60 apartments. And then for referral, items 8 through 10 are all related and should be referred to a future meeting with no specified date at the request of the applicant. And then agenda item 11, also for referral, Legistar 80686 to refer to January 8th at the request of the applicant. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Alder Duncan. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Shepherd. And I will assume Alder Figueroa Cole, did you have something? No, you took your hand down. Okay. I will assume unanimous consent on the consent agenda unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Next on our agenda is agenda item 4, Legistar 80432, located at 118 State Street, Alder District 4, consideration of a conditional use in the proposed downtown core district for a nightclub. And I did request that be taken off of the consent agenda to add a condition indicating that there could be no amplified outdoor sound. And my understanding is that the applicant has agreed to that condition. So that condition then would be added to the other conditions. Heather, did you have anything to add to that information?
I do not. I believe that the applicant was going to try to be present to speak to it.
Okay. Oh, okay, excellent.
And then just to mention that if and when a motion is made, the Plan Commission should make that clear that that condition would be added.
Perfect. Okay, so then Susan McKinney, 118 State Street, in support and wishing to speak. Susan, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me? Do you hear me?
Wonderful. Yes, thank you,
Oh,
Susan.
okay. Yeah, I've been made aware of this condition, and I just want to let everybody know that I want to confirm that we have no plans and no intention at all to play or music outdoors or put any speakers outdoors. I have a music club at 303 North Henry Street, and we do not play music outdoors. And further, I really do value being a good neighbor. And as such, I don't want to intrude on the neighborhood's peace and quiet. And I have no objection to complying with that condition.
Thank you very much, Susan. Appreciate your making time to be here.
Of course.
Okay, so I will close the public hearing. Are there any questions of Susan? Sorry, I should have done that in the other order. So, okay. Then I would be looking for a motion, please. Alder Figueroa Cole.
I guess I want to first apologize that my camera having a little bit of technical difficulties and my camera will be off for the remainder of the meeting. But here goes the motion.
Okay.
So and that's May making a complaint over there, the dog. So move that the plan commission recommends the approval of the rezoning, right, for 118 State Street. I'm sorry, is this what we are in the rezoning one?
For the conditional
use.
use, the zoning was on the consent agenda. So it would be for the conditional use.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got it. Hold on.
So that's agenda item 4.
Just 1 second. I got it. So that make the motion move forward that the plan commission recommends the approval of the conditional use for the 118 State Street on the District 4 for the to propose to the proposed change to the downtown core DC district for a nightclub with the addition of a condition of not having amplified music outside. Will that work?
Yes, along with the other staff conditions.
In addition to the other staff conditions listed on the staff report.
Okay, perfect. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Mendez. Alder Figueroa Cole, did you wish to speak to your motion?
I don't. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, input, discussion? Alder Figueroa Cole, your hand is up. Did you have a comment? No. Okay, then we will come to a vote and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Then moving on to discussion items. Agenda item 12-81029, demolition approval standards, discussion of potential language change. And so this item, as you know, was on the agenda but not covered at our December 7th Plan Commission meeting. And I just wanted to make a couple of comments about that. And I made a couple of comments before, but well, first of all, these two items were going to be a little bit more informal than we are in our regular meetings. It's a little hard to be informal in this format, but a little bit more informal. So when we met about a year ago, one of the items that we discussed was demolitions. And at that special plan commission meeting, there was acknowledgement that we're supposed to pretend like we don't know about future use. And commissioners had acknowledged that it's really kind of hard to pretend that we don't know about what the future use is. And commissioners do tend to treat differently items that have a future use that is strongly recommended in our plans. like affordable housing or history museum or those kinds of things. So there was a discussion about wanting to be able to also take a look at creative mitigation, which we did on, oh, Patrick, remind me, was it Mifflin Street in the old District 2?
Dayton, actually.
Dayton, okay, which we did and came up with a very agreeable mitigation for that. But it was because we were considering what the future use was being looked at. And the main or only really objection to considering future use a year ago was really when the proposed use is permitted, and that we should not be considering future use if it's a permitted use because the applicant has a right to go ahead with that. So those are some of the reasons why this is coming back, because plan commissioners, and not all of you were on the plan commission at that time, but plan commissioners, both through that special meeting and general kind of expressions of concern, wanted to have this looked at and acknowledged that there are times when consideration of future use is appropriate. So with that, I will move to, I think Kate Smith is going to talk about this and just go over what the thought is for a change to this. And we won't be voting on this tonight. This is just for discussion of this particular item. Kate.
Everybody. I hope I don't let me just pull up my documents. I'm a little stereotypically frazzled this evening. I feel like a frazzled December mom. Okay, so as mentioned in the introduction, during one of the early winter plan commission work sessions, there was some frustration expressed by many of the commissioners, some of whom are still on the commission and some who are not, about feeling restricted and stifled in what they could discuss in terms of the demolition permit. And I think feeling frustrated that the language in our ordinances had changed about a year prior, and changed in a way that they felt didn't really serve them in having like robust discussions about the city's development, current and future. So, and to provide kind of a little bit of context on that, is that the ordinance changed which was drafted by my predecessor, but adopted kind of right when I started in land use. So it was a couple years ago now. And it was changed to clearly eliminate that proposed future use, and that's permitted use, could not be grounds for denying a demolition permit. And that is because if you have a permitted use, it's a by right use. We cannot get around your property rights to do that use by denying a demolition, right? So like, it is kind of a way, it was, and I don't have the old ordinance language in front of me, but there was discussion of use as one of the standards for demolition approval. And so the thought was, by removing that at all, it would first take away the chance that you be opening yourself up to legal challenges if the use was permitted. But that also, by removing use altogether, it would, like I said, it would remove that temptation, it would remove that chance of a legal challenge, but you would still be able to discuss proposed future conditional uses during a separate the separate discussion on the conditional use application, because most times because if there was a conditional use, that would come in front of the planning commission. So and then the ordinance was also had that if there was a demolition that was submitted at the same time as a conditional use, that they had to be heard at the same meeting. And then in the interim, there was some confusion about having separate votes. And then that was kind of made clear that there needs to be two, like, an action item for the demolition and an action item for the conditional use with findings for each. But that kind of, I think that there was still frustration that the entire process was just kind of unclear, and it was frustrating, and it was just not as standardized as many commissioners would have preferred, given that there is a vote that we tell you has to be made based on standards that are in the ordinance. I'm going to pause there for a second just to see if Chair Zellers, if you want to add anything at this point. I'm just or if you want, if there's
Are there any questions of Kate? So go ahead, Kate.
Commissioner Heck?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see that raised hand. Thank you very much, Kate. Okay. Commissioner Heck.
It was a late arriving hand.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Kate, for the history of where we ended up. If you're going to say more, maybe I'll hold my question. I didn't realize you were going to, it sounded like maybe you're going to say more.
Yes, I just wanted to pause because sometimes I feel like that when you're talking a really long time in Zoom, no one feels like that they can interrupt you. So I wanted to kind of provide some natural pauses.
Okay, I'll wait until you're finished then, and hear what you have to say first. Thanks.
Okay. So in response, Katie Bannon and I and several other staff members worked on a redraft of the zoning ordinance, which I'm not the zoning ordinance, the demolition ordinance, which is attached in the Legistar. And I'm happy. So if you, does anybody not have it, or great, you will do the screen because I think it is easier to see it. So this is also in the Legistar.
And to clarify, this is in the zoning ordinance. It's part of the zoning ordinance.
Yes, thank you, Katie. It is in the zoning code. It is the demolition ordinance in the zoning code. So the first change is if you'll scroll up for a second, Heather. Stop. Scroll down. Down.
There.
Stop. Okay. So the first change is just we would like feedback for everything. This is kind of a smaller change, so you may not have as much feedback, but really the change is just saying that if the conditional use approval and the demolition or removal permit application are submitted at the same time, they do not need to be heard at the same meeting. this is, I think, most likely, and Katie could talk about this too, something that would be decided on by the applicant or staff, and you wouldn't necessarily see the front end of that. You would just kind of see the change of what's on your agenda. But there was that we felt was just an easy tweak in response to some commissioners thinking that a process change that may help illuminate the difference between demolition, removal, permit applications, and conditional use would be just that if they could be separated at the meeting between multiple meetings, they could be. I don't, I think that, again, and Katie can talk a little about this. I don't know how often this will be used. I think that some of the feedback from developers and from people involved in these projects was that they liked to only appear at one meeting, but this just kind of gives us the flexibility. So it's a small change. And I think I have no idea how often it will be used, but it provides that opportunity.
I would define it as cleanup almost, because today someone can just apply for the demolition and then come back for something else already.
Right. So that is one change. Like I said, I'll pause again. Does anybody have any questions about that change?
Commissioner Heck?
Thank you. This is probably for Katie Bannon. So I heard that there's it's not well defined who makes a decision about whether or not a demolition application is heard at the same time as a conditional use application. It seems oftentimes they go together because people are in a hurry. But I know of situations where demolition applications in the current version of the zoning code seem to be occasionally put in earlier because they might be controversial. So in that situation, who makes the decision, will make the decision if we pass this particular portion of the changes?
Well, why I think this is really kind of a cleanup zoning code change is that today I think someone could just apply for a demolition and we don't know what they're going to do, whether it's going to be a permitted use, a conditional use, something else. Maybe they're just grassing over the lot and waiting. That's not something that they're required to provide as part of their demolition application. So that's why this is really cleanup, and it's going to be the applicant's decision of whether they want to include that information when they're applying for a demolition or not. But as you said, many do apply together today. I think it makes sense that they do so from a timing perspective and of just explaining overall the vision and what the site will be in the future, what the project actually is. So that's, I think, where this overall code change is getting at. We know that's something that's the Plan Commission is thinking about and talking about is what is the project that's proposed too, if you have that information right in front of you. So trying to kind of assist with making that clear in the ordinance as well.
Thanks.
Did that answer your question?
It did, but I'm still a little bit nervous. I'm going to speak informally since we're
Yes, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I'm still a little bit concerned because I do think of those situations where perhaps it's even been in the media what a developer is planning to do, yet they submit their demolition application even a month before they're going to submit their land use application. And so there's a disconnect there still potentially in those situations. I don't know what to do about that. Do we?
I think if you don't have information about the proposed project in front of you, then that can't be one of the things that's considered. So, maybe it's a denial or a referral then if you don't think you have enough information for that criteria. That's my thought. What do you think, Kate?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's kind of analogous to like when there's like during a trial, a judge hears all of the information, but they're constrained by the law about what they actually can consider in making their decision. So they would just have to choose to not use kind of things that are not in evidence, if you will, in order to make their decision. So it's kind of the same thing, right? Like you come as people in from the world, you come with all sorts of information, either presented to you here or from your, personal and professional backgrounds. But like Katie said, when making a determination on an application, you have to use the facts that are on the application in front of you. So I don't think there's really a way to like live within a vacuum of not knowing things. Do you know what I mean? Like they're just kind of, it isn't, if it's a big controversial project and if it's in the media, you're going to know about it regardless of what the, when it's on the agenda.
And I would just comment that if it is a building that is in use, it doesn't have structural problems, and is in a desirable location, I would think that it would be hard for the plan commission to say, yeah, fine, go ahead and tear it down if we don't know that something else is going to be going there that would mean that it's not going to be just an empty hole. So I guess I don't have a particular problem, but the plan commission has to be willing to say, oh, we aren't going to tear this down. There's no reason to,
Particularly if I think if it's historically significant, right? Because, and that's why it's like, if it's historically significant, we can consider the proposed project. If there's no proposed project and it's just, okay, I guess you're just going to claim that you're going to put grass there.
Yeah.
Maybe maybe you don't want to approve that demolition.
Yeah. Good point, Katie. Good point. Yeah.
I'll just close by saying that makes sense to me, and as long as future plan commissioners are aware of this subtlety and it becomes practice that we do occasionally need more information before we can approve it. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner. Alder Figueroa Cole.
Thank you. So I guess I'm confused again on this topic. I thought I heard you say, Kate, that as a landowner, if I want to demolish something on my land, I have the right to do that if it's not conditional use. So I can just ask for a. Do I have to have a permit anytime I'm going to demolish something?
Yes.
If I own, right? Okay, so as an owner of that property, do I have the right to demolish that property without, do I have the right to demolish the property? I mean, let's take aside any historic value of that property. Let's just say whatever, something that doesn't have historical value. Don't I have the right to do that without telling you what I'm doing with the property?
No, you
Is
don't
that the
have to say what you're going to do, but the plan commission can deny that if it is structurally sound and being used. So there is the ability of the plan commission to say no, that they are not going to approve that.
But it has to be based on the demolition standards, right? It can't be on something outside the code is kind of the.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, okay. So Wisconsin lets municipalities have demolition standards and to require permits. Some municipalities have chosen to do it all administratively. Some municipalities have chosen to have them involved this way. I think that like there is a big existential debate really in terms of what property rights are, is that how involved should a plan commission or this type of board be in these circumstances that, just like you asked about, that it is that is kind of a policy or a philosophical question about this, right? But in terms of what we can do, we can require this type of permit, and we can require that there be standards that have to be met for the permit to be issued. The challenge is that denying the permit runs into a tension of if it's going to be a runaround to it's going to be a runaround to deny someone's permitted use, which is why we say you have to have findings that the standards are met in order to base the denial for a demolition.
And so I would just say that most likely it would have, as Katie said, something to do with us getting information that it is historically significant, because that's one of our standards.
Right, so-
Commissioner Shepherd?
But, mm,
Yes, since we're being sort of informal here, my concern is not so much with the large projects, as was mentioned. We'll hear about that one way or the other. My issue is always with the smaller one, with the neighbor who wants to tear down their garage and put in their dream music studio, and again, sort of how the neighbors respond to it. So I get, again, sort of the reason for the change here from shall to may and that sort. And I think we can live with that. But again, my concern is probably more with smaller, even once again, residential sort of demolitions and what might come of that. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Alder Figueroa Cole?
yeah, I mean, I guess I can probably, I'm not formulating my question correctly, but yes, we have the demolitions for standard are pretty heavy when it comes to preservation, and the building is sound, but we have given demolition permits for sound buildings where relocation is not possible. But in all of those instances, I mean, can we deny the permit without knowing what's going to happen there? That's what I'm trying to get at. I mean, I think that's what at the center of this argument is what we're talking about, right? I mean, I don't need to know what this is for. It's just if it meets the standards. Could be a sound building, and the owner proven that the location can be possible and it's not a historic value. Can we still deny the permit without knowing what's going to be the replacement of it?
We have to use the standards. So if it's not historic and there are none of the other standards that would mean that we should turn it down, then we should approve it.
Without knowing the purpose of the future use.
Right.
Right.
Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. Looking at this paired with the next text change, I'm wondering if we can fully review a proposed demolition without knowing it, because the proposed project and its effect on city goals is one of the listed standards now. Now I realize that's specific to historic, but it kind of seems like we can't fully review all of the standards if we don't know the proposed project, unless I'm overthinking that.
Well,
I can't remember, Kate, is it just if that information has been provided to us? I don't have the ordinance right up
in front of me. Hold on a second.
Thank you, Heather.
I mean, I guess it says may consider, so we don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, to be honest, I think Katie and I, and working with Heather Bailey, the preservation planner, and Heather Sutter and the rest of the team, the challenge is that we were having a hard time crafting the language without necessarily understanding how the commission wanted the policy outcomes changed here, right? Like we knew that there was some concern, we knew that there was definitely concern and frustration from the last work session about properties with high historic value, or I'm sorry, with historic value and significance, and how to weigh the demolition of these properties, which are in, good structural shape, right? But if there were other countervailing concerns or kind of reasons to approve this demolition, right? And that would be reasons that were the effect of the adopted city plans and the goals. And so, but sometimes I think it was a bit of a writing challenge, I think, to write our way to a potential outcome that we didn't know what people wanted.
But I think, I can't remember if this was an initial draft. It's a little messy, but at least at one point it said, if applicable and submitted by the applicant or something like that. Kate, do you see that on there? So the intent was, again, they don't have to submit what the proposed project is. It could be a permitted use that comes down the line years from now. But if it was submitted and that was something that the Plan Commission was going to use to help determine, yes, it's high historic value and significance, but because it's meeting adopted city plans and goals, we think this could be approved. But it was only if shared. I don't know why that was crossed out. But that was the intent there, because that does seem to be, in practice, part of when a project is coming on a site that does have a structure or a site that Landmarks Commission has determined has high historic value or significance, significance, I guess I should say. There were considerations happening about, okay, but what's proposed and why is this acceptable? I see Heather Stouter raising her hand here.
Heather, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Zellers, and thanks, Katie. Just to build on what Katie's saying, I wanted to provide an example of a fairly recently approved project that the Plan Commission, I think, was really wrestling with this, and that is the demolition of St. John's Lutheran Church on East Washington Avenue, really close to downtown, for a new 10 plus story building to include a lot of affordable housing, a lot of new housing units right downtown. In that particular case, the advice from the Landmarks Commission was that St. John's Lutheran Church building was historically significant. Indeed, it was. It had been added to over the years. But, I think if the Plan Commission had not known what was being proposed there and felt that, really that proposed new use kind of tipped the scales or, on balance, perhaps led the Plan Commission to more readily approve that demolition. So even though the Plan Commission was acting, legally with, blinders on and not considering that proposed future use, we all, commissioners, staff alike, knew what that proposed future use was. And so I think that this language that's been drafted here would allow the Plan Commission to say, aha, yes, Landmarks Commission, we see that this is historically significant, but we're weighing that with a proposed future use in front of us. And we believe that proposed future use really furthers adopted city plans and goals to the point that we will still be approving this demolition. And the Plan Commission may even go on to say, we'll approve the demolition, but relics of the building need to be captured in pictures or stories and included in the new building. They can place some conditions of approval that relate to the historic nature of the existing building. And so I just wanted to provide that example so that folks could kind of see, again, why I recall or why I think former Plan Commissioners and current Plan Commissioners brought this up as a concern.
And similarly, the History Museum on the Square. I mean, in our discussion, commissioners even mentioned future use as a reason to approve the demolition, even though Landmarks had said, given us their red light for it. Commissioner Heck.
Thanks. I have with regards to what we're discussing, just a language suggestion, maybe. In the language towards the end of what's being proposed, it says the Plan Commission may consider the proposed project's effect on adopted city plans and goals. But if there isn't a proposed project, that language is a little awkward. So would it be better, maybe, Kate Smith, to say the Plan Commission may consider the effect on adopted city plans and goals of a future of any proposed project, so that it still applies whether there's a proposed project or not. Do you know what I'm saying? It's sort of assuming there is a proposed project with the way the language is written. It's kind of nitpicking, but
No, look, I think they say aren't writers supposed to love edits, and then we like cry in a corner because we feel deeply insecure about our writing. But I also, my internet, I think, froze you for a second. So could you say, I'm trying to take notes on it. Could you say it one more time?
instead of saying may consider the proposed projects, for situations when there's not a proposed project, we still want the language to be appropriate. So it could say the Plan Commission may consider the effect on adopted city plans and goals of any proposed project, in case there's not one. Just a thought. And then I have a question about historic value. There's still some subjectivity in Landmark's current method of green light, yellow light, red light. And does historic value is maybe I think Heather Bailey might be here, right? I can't remember. No, it looks like she is not.
Yeah,
But-
no.
But I think a yellow light in Landmark's policy manual description of their decisions says that a structure has no historic value, but is the product of a great architect or some related to some greater cultural movement or something like that. So if Landmarks heads in this proposed language, if Landmarks says yellow, would this not apply? Because is that historic value or not, or is that subjectivity that Plan Commission will have to grapple with?
I think that's the significance part of it. So the Katie, now I think so for
Yes.
commissioners, yeah,
That's
that
my
word-
understanding from
yeah,
talking with
that-
Heather Bailey, that that they're finding us, no, we'll check with her again, but that it has historic value, but it's not significant, is kind of that yellow light. We're like, it's part of a bigger movement, but it's not significant.
So the original when we were discussing this at a earlier work session, the chair of the Landmarks Commission was also there, and she explained that the demos have either green light, red light, or yellow light. So just to make sure that does anybody have any questions about those terms, or not sure that they've heard those terms before? I just want to make sure we're all talking with the same base of knowledge. Because I'm happy to.
Alder
Gotcha.
Figueroa Cole, did you have a comment about this one?
So, I mean, if you go back to that screen, I thought I was clear, but in the screen, they're combining two categories. It's saying historic value and significance. So they're two different things. So can you please do refresh what the levels are, please?
Yeah, so in practice, what this would mean is that it would be either the projects that are given the red light or projects that are given the yellow light.
I didn't
So
think yellow light would be part of this because those do not have significance.
I
I,
thought that,
I think Kate's right on this one, but I think we should double check because this is where some of the judgment of the plan commission comes in. And so I think in both of those cases, my understanding is we would be considering then future use, and it would be the judgment of plan commissioners as to whether the future use then was such that we would go ahead and okay the demolition.
I'm going to jump in and say, with the language the way it is, I think that Katie is correct. If it said historic value or significance, I think that would include yellow light, but it says and historic value and significance. To me, that's leaning more towards red light only.
And-
We'd have to read what the yellow light language really says. But again, landmarks could change the way that, some of their language and consideration at any time. So leaning too much on their language maybe is not great. I don't know.
If
Well,
there's any confusion there, I would suggest, because I think the plan commission should have that level of discretion to decide if in weighing. So if there's any thing that needs to be done to change the language to make that clear, that's my input anyway on this during the discussion, that we should make sure that that's clear.
yeah, I mean, I think that the high level takeaway is that we need to have this clarity on what types of projects are going to come. But the question there is, I'm not sure that I'm hearing consensus or direction on if I'm hearing consensus that this is written unclearly, but I'm not hearing a consensus on if the yellow light projects should be considered in this bucket, or if they should not be.
Any commissioners want to weigh in on that? Commissioner Mendez.
Thank you, Chair. In my opinion, I think yellow and red are included in this. Yellow would be in the first part, right? Because we're considering the landmarks report. And then we can go from there. But the next part is saying now it's red. Now it's telling us that we may consider it because we're going to demolish something that's historical or high value or significance, right? So it's really hot, really touchy, really high up there. But there's good reasons for us to consider it for the greater good. The yellow is, like Katie said, it's one or the other. It's so.
So this
kinda
is
do what you
just
want.
what we drafted. We can draft something else. So I think we're interested more in feedback. Like, do you think that you should hear yellow light projects? Like, I think that's kind of the question that we need some feedback on. Not what it's written. We ignore what's written. We can write whatever we want. But what do you think should be in front of you?
But don't we hear them anyway? We just
Yeah.
maybe don't have, they usually just jump right onto consent if they're green or possibly yellow, but we do hear them no matter what, unless it's one of the administrative ones.
Right.
Correct.
Correct. Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. I would be inclined to have this additional language about propose, the plans and goals to cover both yellow and red. I just think it's usually, we're having the discussion generally about any yellow and red property and reviewing this report. That seems more consistent to me.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Heck,
I agree with what Commissioner Solheim just had to say.
thank you. Alder Figueroa Cole,
Well, I mean, I will agree with that only if we were have these um, definition standards, whatever you want to call them, well defined, coming from landmarks. Like we were just talking about how much weight we're putting from landmarks perspective, and I'm not clear. Here I asked a few minutes ago to give me the definitions of the different types, and here we are not even understanding that. So, I mean, when I think of the yellow, I think about that the one for the CUNA Mutual site that had historical significance, but it wasn't, you know, it wasn't something that needed to be really preserved. We could just preserve the history by incorporating it into the new building. So, not understanding what the definitions of these levels are, I can't say keep it there or not keep it there. That's what I feel about at this moment.
so you would like to have those definitions closer at hand for us to be able to refer to and have them as clear as possible, knowing that, I mean, one of our jobs is to be able to make a judgment when things aren't crystal clear because things are not necessarily totally clear, or else we could have a computer do it. But
No, I agree with that, but at the same time, not just this ordinance, all of our ordinance are filled with words that mean nothing. They're so like broad or so I mean, some of them are, I get it. They're not just plain English. They're using some legal content, and you have people like me. I'm not going to point to anybody else on the commissioners, but people like me trying to really get their head around this terminology that is, it's not that clear to translate into plain English. So I would like to have clarity on what the intent is. What the different classifications are, and what is the intent behind those classifications before we put these words into our own ordinance. That's
okay.
you know.
So when this comes back, if we can have at hand the definitions that Landmarks uses of green, red, yellow, that would be helpful. Okay, Commissioner Shepherd.
Yeah, I just want to follow up with those comments, and I agree with every one of those points. I think the language that we're using, red, yellow, and that sort of thing. Just to be clear about this, it's technocratic speak, and the public will not get it. And if we talk that way to the public, they're going to, rightfully so, probably, once again, interpret it as we're trying to pull a fast one, or what are we trying to hide, and that sort. So either we, again, use the terms and we define them clearly in obvious places, or we use language that isn't so, sort of technical or inside baseball. Thanks.
Okay. And so, Commissioner Shepherd, did you have a feeling about, as far as you understand red and yellow, whether both of those should be included or not?
I think I do, but
Okay.
quite frankly, if I'm not a city planner right now, so I don't dig into this. I'm on the plan commission, but I'm not engaged with this every day, So, even as we start to talk about it, I had to sort of, fire up the old, memory cells and that sort of thing. So the language, I think, again, can get in the way of good intention.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Spencer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to agree. I think Commissioner Solheim and Heck had said green. I'm sorry, not green. That's pretty straightforward. What I think we agree on as red and yellow. it's hard to see. I'm not seeing people's faces, but I think what we think of as the definitions of red and yellow, in terms of landmarks commissions, I agree that's what we should be talking about here. And I had to laugh a little bit because I've been on the Plan Commission for years, and we've heard a lot of historic and landmark commission comments. And hearing what is historically significant is still so subjective, and it's like trying to grab onto jello sometimes and trying to like pin it down or nail down jello. I'm sorry, I'm very bad with idioms and sayings, but it's like it's really it's just frustrating and trying to nail down like one definition and what idea of what one group of people think it is, and trying to satisfy a group. And when I think that we've done like a really good job of kind of one project, like, yes, we've done it, we've made people happy, we've saved a historic project, we go on to another project and it's like, no, we've done it again. But yeah, I would say red and yellow are good, and just kind of ignoring what's written in this draft document, and going from there. So, but thank you for the work that you've done for tonight to Kate.
And it's
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Spencer. Yes, it's generated some discussion here. I would like to just sum up. As you know, we don't have to come to a vote or anything. What I'm hearing as general consensus, although perhaps not total unanimity, is that we would want to include what landmarks includes as red and yellow, and a recrafting of the language so that's clear, and also to have, when we actually do have to take a vote on this, is to have at hand precisely how the Landmarks Commission is using those terms, because as you know, that's just shorthand for their longer definitions of those three elements. So is that a reasonable summary of where commissioners are? If you could like do thumbs up, if that, okay, yes, okay. So then that is what we would give back to you, Kate, for going forward on this, and when we do come to a vote. Did you have a question that you had, or?
I did,
You
and
wanted to
now
add-
you're going to yes, and I don't want to I know that it sounds like we're trying to move on from this conversation, but it is so immensely helpful to get feedback from all of you. So I'm going to take this opportunity for one more piece of feedback is so I think it's so interesting how Commissioner Shepherd was talking about technocratic language, and that made me think about how there is a lot of technocratic language at the Landmarks Commission because they need to come with very specific technical knowledge, and they use the Secretary Standards of the Interior to make a lot of determinations. And there really is this preciseness in what they are tasked to do that's based on that is based on things that are not really that digestible to the public, right? And that it then has to, and I think that this, like, the red light and the yellow light and the green light is a shorthand way of kind of using this metaphor to convey what is actually at the root quite technocratic, right? Like they are making these determinations that are based on very specific findings and knowledge that they have required to come to conclusions based on. So my question is, is that maybe even that an easier way is to not work on defining these terms necessarily in a way that is palatable and digestible to the public, but to perhaps lean on the technocratic knowledge that the land commissioners, that the Landmarks Commission has, and instead have something where instead of we're empowering or kind of saying if they flag or raise caution about the demolition, then you can consider these things, right? That it is kind of putting the understanding that they are coming to this with a great base of knowledge. And instead of even separating it into this like kind of bucket of red, yellow, green, and then asking for feedback about if you think you should consider these, what if it is just more something that is that where properties where the Landmarks Commission has raised a caution about demolition, then we are asking you to consider the proposed project if it's put forth, something like that. Because you know, they really do get into the weeds with these types of projects. So some of that work, you know, maybe it is a little bit of a shifting of work, but perhaps it's then coming to you in a way that is easier to talk about.
So why don't you touch base with Heather Bailey, you know, in regard to that that approach, and if that's something that Heather thinks would be worthwhile, perhaps that could be part of what you come back to the commission with. Do commissioners have any thoughts about that? Alder Figueroa Cole? Alder?
Yes. So I actually have a question for you. So I'm okay with that strategy. Actually, I just get pretty triggered by some adjectives that people can just misinterpret however they want. So if we can point to the source, that definitely way better. But I have a question for you. Is this topic going to be continue to have more discussions of the demolition standards in our special meeting next year, or what is the process here? What
We
is the
can
expectation for this?
We can certainly do that. I think that this is a sticky kind of topic that that does tend to come back and back. So if that's something you would suggest we have again at one of our special meetings, we can certainly do this because it's not something that's really going to go away. Commissioner Heck?
So I'm sorry, I
Oh,
want to just, yeah, so I just
okay.
want to clarify. I mean, there's some elders, including myself, that have been looking at the standards and have been trying to formulate some other changes, not specifically directly to this. So I just wanted to know if instead of meal piecing this particular change, if we could just have them all in one discussion. That's really what I was wondering at this point.
So you're suggesting having a meeting to talk about other kinds of changes. Are you saying that you think we should not proceed with this one and wait for whatever?
I mean, I don't know, I guess. I mean, if that's what we're trying to do, you think that, so is this change gonna come back to us
Yes.
to happen soon? So that means then the changes that we are talking about that we're discussing, the additional changes we're discussing, then we just move them forward as an ordinance change and then refer them to the committee, or do we just discuss the whole ordinance in a special meeting? I guess that's what I'm trying to understand.
Well, since this is a kind of informal thing, I will suggest that we go ahead with this. This has been a year since the Plan Commission had asked for this, and it is a problem right now because commissioners consider future use, even though the ordinance doesn't, you know, really provide for that. So my recommendation would be to take care of this, go ahead and if Alder Figueroa Cole, you're suggesting that we have a meeting that digs into more things having to do with demolition, that we go ahead and do that at one of our special meetings in 2024. And there could be additional improvements, amendments to the demolition ordinance that would come out of that and come out of the thinking of the current alders. So I think that would be fine.
Thank you.
Commissioner Heck?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I agree that moving these changes forward and letting staff come up with a recommendation based on our discussions and actually if alders are willing to go ahead and submit that as ordinance change, and it will come back to Plan Commission, so we can always discuss it a little bit more if we feel like there needs to still be another language tweak or something. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on this topic before we move on? Seeing no raised hands. Kate, thank you very much. And Katie, thank you too very much for bringing this forward and your insights. Then moving on, the next item on the agenda is a resumption of the West and Northeast area plans, the progress update and Plan Commission input on key issues. And my understanding is that Dan McAuliffe is going to kick this off. Is that correct?
If you'd like to do that before the public comment.
He did not get through. Yeah, maybe we should have the public comment first. Why don't we do that? So we have, I will open the public. Oh, it's just a discussion item, so it's not a public hearing. So the first registrant is Dan Steyer, San Juan Trail, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Dan, you have 3 minutes.
Hello. Thank you, Chair Zellers and all commissioners for the opportunity to speak this evening. On the council floor last Tuesday, our District 19 Alder, Kristen Slack, made a positive statement concerning the merits of a convincing neighborhood analysis of the escalator clause select conditions factors. With reference to the project we oppose on Old Sauk Road due to its height and density, our analysis would provide fair consideration of the neighborhood's concerns relating to height and density. Letters covering the analysis and the analysis itself have been filed with the commission prior to this meeting. Serving the interests of quote unquote certainty, the Plan Division now returns to the commission to recommend scrapping the escalator clause select conditions factors in favor of an quote unquote acceptable alternative approach. The written comment we filed earlier today describes the arbitrary and capricious nature of that recommendation, depriving citizens of any meaningful input in the decision-making process. Nonetheless, having performed the rigorous factual analysis in accordance with the Plan Division's rule, we ask as Madison citizens and taxpayers for meaningful input concerning the select conditions factors. Don't change the rule yet again. But if you do decide to abolish the escalator clause, we submit that the Pierstove parcels on Old Sauk Road should be designated LMR in the coming West Area Plan. The relevant facts strongly support keeping these parcels in the LMR category. Alder Slack has gone on record informing her constituents that she is in favor of lower height and density on the Old Sauk Road parcels than is currently proposed. She has also stated on the Common Council floor that she is persuaded by the merits of our fact-based position. Finally, Alder Slack has recently received a petition in opposition to the height and density of the project currently proposed, signed by more than 250 of her District 19 constituents. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. The next registrant is Gwen Long, Sauk Creek Drive, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Gwen, you have 3 minutes.
I will pass at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gwen. The next registrant is George Meyer, Randolph Drive, Madison, opposed, wishing to speak. George, you have 3 minutes.
Chair, there's no person in attendance by that name.
Okay, thank you. And the next registrant is Dawn Marie Zimmerman, Sauk Creek Drive, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Dawn, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Oh gosh, I don't even know where to start. I don't really have a lot of spoons. I don't know if you're familiar with that. But a lot of people who have disabilities, chronic stuff, it's a theory where you have to use so much energy, be it physical, mental, emotional, to do things throughout the day. And we have a lot less of it, and we use a lot more of them per thing that we do. I'm out of spoons, so I'm gonna have to borrow from tomorrow. So bear with me. So I'm disabled, and I wanted to talk about the Sauk Creek Greenway and the proposed multi-use path. I guess my first thought as someone who's a member of the disability community is that there are so many different kinds of disabilities and needs out there, and each disability doesn't always look exactly the same from person to person. And I'm very curious as to who as far as like a nonprofit or an agency or that sort of thing, what kind of disability group is being consulted with as far as the needs that would need to be put into a multi-use path that was accessible. Because there's a lot of different kinds of needs. And another thing, I guess, besides, well, one of the things that we say in the disability community, and I know a lot of other communities use this expression too, is nothing about us without us. So if you're gonna plan a path, you gotta bring the disability community in, and that's just a big thing. But the terrain is, like a big thing. The grade of some of the parts of it is extremely steep. Um, is the path going to be from one end to the other? Is it going to be part of it that's accessible? Is any of it going to be accessible? How much more is it going to cost to make that happen than if it wasn't? One of the things that also occurred to me, I used to live over on the Little Hammersley off of like Midvale Road, that Little Hammersley. And behind where we lived, there was a bike path that's very well used. It's the one that has the bridge that goes over the Beltline over
Thank
to
you. Thank you, Dawn. That concludes your 3 minutes. Are there any questions of any of our registrants?
Chair Zellers, we do have
Yes.
3 additional recent registrations.
Okay, could you please introduce
Yes.
them?
Tony Brown of Widgeon Way, opposed, to be followed by Benjamin Wolma.
Tony, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Terrific, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Yes, I wanted to comment specifically on the proposed bike path through the Sauk Creek Woods and the Greenway plan, and obviously voicing my opposition. I live in the neighborhood and I walk the woods quite often, and it's such a tranquil, peaceful place. And if every commissioner hasn't walked it yet, I urge them to do so. You'll see beauty in the woods, but also erosion around the creek. Many invasive plants, fallen trees that need to be cleared out. And apparently, I'm kind of late. I've only started hearing about this in the last 6 months, but apparently this should have been maintained for decades, the space, and it wasn't. And now it's in disrepair, severe disrepair. So it seems to me that addressing and remedying the landscape should be at the forefront and not a bike path that's going to jeopardize the the ecosystem there. I'm just concerned about what such a path would do to this ecosystem of plants and animals that are housed within. And from what I can tell, the suggested route doesn't even serve a purpose, as it simply duplicates existing routes and kind of ends up nowhere. I am a biker. I love accessing the bike paths in Madison, so it's not like I'm anti-biking. I mean, I think it's fabulous that we're one of the top in the country. But I'm just wondering if any studies have been conducted on the impact to the ecosystem. And I'm kind of wondering when this plan came up and why the residents weren't, why there wasn't like a survey or some kind of a meeting to ask the residents if we thought it would be a good use of our tax dollars. And that's my under 3-minute comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
Okay, the next registrant is Benjamin Wolma of Lakewood Gardens Lane, neither supporting nor opposing, to be followed by Paul Hare.
And Benjamin, you have 3 minutes.
Hello. Hello, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I use a bicycle as my primary mode of transportation at this point. I have a family of 6, and we elected to go down to 1 vehicle because the infrastructure in part of Madison where I live allows us to do that. And looking at both the plans in this agenda item, I was really excited to see a lot of the proposed bike paths and widened sidewalks, especially up 51 North and Portage Road in particular. I also was really pleased to see the increased ways to get across the Beltline. So I want to thank everybody for that. My main comments in opposition to the plan are about increasing vehicle connections, particularly adding vehicle connections at Appalachian Way, considering making St. Dunstan a 2-way street with future development, connecting Yosemite. I think that sort of attitude and approach is in direct opposition to the Vision Zero goals for the city. I don't see anything that encouraging driving does to make things safer, either physically or environmentally. And I would really like the Plan Commission and anyone else involved in helping build our city to get rid of traffic's mandate to increase vehicle connection and throughput. But this came up recently with meetings regarding the 1617 Sherman redevelopment, and I'm adding another public street through that area. So I'd really like the Plan Commission to consider in these proposals increasing safety for everybody, trying to get people out of vehicles into transit, into active modes of transport, and not making it easier for cars to cut through residential neighborhoods. I think it would be great if in these plans too, we could come up with some sort of standardized road designs so we don't have controversial issues like we did at the last common council meeting regarding the widened sidewalk on Mineral Point Road. I'm really grateful for how that vote turned out, but it seems really unfortunate that we're still having debates about safety of people versus maintaining 4 lanes of traffic, maintaining trees along the edges of road, and that sort of thing. And I guess if I have a few seconds left, my final comment on the Salt Creek path, since so many people seem opposed to it, is maybe focus on some east-west connections, maybe bridges over the creek there. That seems like it'd be a lot more helpful than another north-south connection in that spot.
Thank you, Benjamin. That does conclude your available time.
The final registered speaker is Paul Hare of East Geneva Circle, neither supporting nor opposed.
And
Chair,
Paul-
there's no person.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Jesse.
Yep.
Okay, then we'll go now to Dan McAuliffe. Dan.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome again. My name is Dan McAuliffe. I am one of the co-leads on the Northeast Area Plan. So we're going to kind of tag team this a little bit. So Ben will be advancing the slides, but I do have a little bit of a cutoff, so I'll be taking you through the building heights section of our presentation before we're handing it off to another person. So much like the West Area Plan, we are taking a look at the allowable building heights within the area. So and trying again, kind of building on the conversation last time, trying to provide a little bit more guidance to some of those land uses that have historically been more open-ended, or didn't have height guidance or allowed height beyond their range if discussed in an adopted plan. So the map on the right or on the left is actually an elevation map, a building elevation map that's produced by the airport. So this basically says building heights the top of buildings cannot exceed these defined elevations. From that, we can work backwards into a maximum allowable height. But there are some fairly significant restrictions in the area. There is a variance process to allow heights greater than this map. And we've been trying to work with the Encounter Regional Airport to get a little bit of better understanding about what that process looks like and kind of the conditions. Because certainly if we are looking at potentially providing a little bit more height guidance in this area, that is certainly helpful to know. So the map on the right is, we've outlined all those land uses in our area that don't have height guidance or have escalators allowed by those comp plan ranges. So that's industrial, employment, special institutional, regional mixed use, general commercial, and employment. Next slide. So we have started really using the Greater Easttown Area Plan as a kind of a guide. And there's a couple areas that we saw as really kind of worth our attention. So looking kind of at the scales of development that are possible, we did see that the area to the north of East Washington could be an appropriate use or appropriate area for some greater heights. Right now it's at 5. It is directly in front of those BRT stations. And as you may recall from our conversation on Thursday, this is one of those target areas that we might be looking for vacating those frontage roads. The second area that we saw as potentially worthy of discussion, I may have very poorly labeled it as market misalignment. So this is the 8 and 12 story area along the interstate within the Greater Easttown Area Plan. And in this plan, the land use recommendation is general commercial with an employment overlay. As a result of those zoning categories, CCT and CC, we are creating basically there's a zoning use with that allows for mixed use in residential districts or mixed use in residential buildings. And this, we can certainly see a situation where the zoning allows those uses. The plan allows for a very intensive height, and just kind of we could be looking at some development proposals for a 12-story residential building in areas that we are generally thinking might not be the best for residential use. Next slide. So this is, again, kind of how that might work out. Again, possibly moving to 8 stories on the north side of East Washington. There is a transition there to LMR, but it is relatively, it could be an okay situation. The current hotel is 6 stories, so this is kind of right in that height range, the 6 to 8. As I mentioned, we didn't change the heights on the interstate frontage. Those are kind of the ones that are shown there. And a lot of those other heights in the employment area, those are directly from those airport height limits. So while we might be okay with heights greater than that, we don't want to show a height in this plan beyond what could reasonably be permitted, just provide the development community with consistent guidance. That I don't know if you want to take this now or if you move on to the balance.
What
of the
is your question about this? What are you looking for from the plan commissioners in regard to the building heights?
I think for us right now is to what extent the plan commission is comfortable with us looking at heights that were adopted in recently adopted plans and considering alternatives from those.
And the alternatives are all increased heights from what I understand, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So input, Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify. So if these were in the plan, would they be absolute maximums like how we have in the downtown area, or would someone be able to apply with the, you know, conditional use and go over this, or would it actually be maximum?
So these would be in the plan. At this point, you know, it certainly could be a follow-up if there's direction from the plan commission and policymakers about moving those into the ordinance. I think there's pros and cons both ways. You know, in the plan, we've always kind of you know, assumed those lines between land uses is a little fuzzy, and maybe they can get nudged one way or the other. But
So
if
for
that,
the downtown plan, it's both in the plan and in the ordinance. And what we're talking about here is having it in the plan. It would not be in the ordinance.
Thank
So
you.
it would
Yeah.
not be. Is that correct, Ann?
that's correct right now. And, you know, if there is guidance in the future to, you know, move these to the zoning ordinance, we certainly could. But right now, we're just talking about the plan, correct?
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying that. I guess in terms of some input, you know, I always feel a little iffy about the 8-story height, because it's really just a very impractical building height. We see very few buildings at 8 stories due to costs. So I'm just wondering, you know, if that could be evaluated, if that's really the right metric to put in there, or if that should be to 10. And, you know, I'm just thinking about, we were looking at this at our last meeting and looking at some of the possibilities in terms of, you know, removal of the frontage road in that area on the East Wash and how it compares to the 800 block of East Wash and the height that we've seen there. And I'm thinking, you know, a lot of those buildings and what has created a lot of the activity and intensity there is really more of a 12 to 14 story building. So if we kind of want that, another node similar to that, I think perhaps we should consider higher building heights in this particular area.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other comments, direction for this plan, for the way this plan should go? Commissioner Heck.
Thanks. I don't know if Dan or Heather might know something about this, but if we did have higher heights along East Wash, assuming that we vacate the frontage road, is there anything in the plans that recommends a gradual decrease to the adjacent LMR area on that backside, or is that more actual zoning code and urban design districts? Although I realize this doesn't have one. Can you suggest that in the plan if we did go up to 12 or 14, that it be tiered down to the 3 stories or less behind it?
Yeah, I do think that's something that we could put in the plan. We are looking at how we can kind of dovetail some of those more specific design guidelines from the Greater East Town, and revising some of the urban design districts is one of those things that we are thinking about. I know the tapering has been pretty successful. I know in the Capital East plan, there was the, you know, some of the higher heights, and then on the Mifflin side, it was 3 plus 30 degrees. That could be something we look at as well, particularly on those deeper blocks.
Heather?
Yeah, this is great discussion. I just wanted to quickly jump in and remind the commission that we'd like to talk about building heights sort of more broadly, not just related to Northeast, but so some of these questions, just remember them. The question of, is it just plans? Is it zoning? What else can we do? We'd like to make sure that we get your input on that more broadly for the area plans.
I have things to say. Good.
Okay, anything else about what Dan raised here? And any comments about what Commissioner Solheim suggested? I like what she suggested myself, so. Commissioner Solheim?
I just wanted to add in, because you also had a separate question about I think the commercial along the interstate, and I do appreciate that change, given the proximity to the interstate there and it not being necessarily appropriate for a purely residential building.
Okay, thank you.
So just to add to that, that is something that, I think we can talk more about it. It was just something that we noticed, particularly when we were looking at the heights, that we know that CCT, is one of those most appropriate zoning categories for general commercial, but we do use it in a lot of other ways to implement our recommendations. And so, I think we'll kind of keep that in mind as we move forward. And that might be a basis of a proactive rezoning, just as a heads up. But I appreciate the comments.
So where are other commissioners on this? Any comments, input? Happy with what Commissioner Solheim suggested? I'm seeing some yeses. Okay. Okay, then let's move on. And did you have anything else, Dan?
I think Heather's going to take these next few slides.
Okay, very good. Heather.
All right, thank you. And thanks to Dan. Dan will be leaving now with a conflict. Thank you for being here, Dan.
Yeah, thanks.
So I wanted to just talk for a moment about the issue that we're going to cover next. And it's the issue of kind of grappling with, do we just have one plan? Do we retire old plans? Many of you who were on the commission when we were going through kind of building the new planning framework for the city grappled with this issue, and we said, boy, we're going to have to come back to that. We don't have all the answers. I would say that we still don't have all the answers. This is something where there are a lot of really good nuanced staff perspectives on these, and certainly perspectives from those who have been involved in planning processes through the years. I want to thank the teams in both the West and the Northeast area plan for kind of being the first to really go through in detail all of the underlying plans. And Ben and Linda and then Lisa will actually share some of the findings from the West and then the Northeast. But Ben, would you mind sharing screen for just a quick setup of this issue from the materials that were prepared for last week? So here's a good visual. This is the West area plan with the blue line, and then underlying adopted plans from the past are in different colors there: Spring Harbor, University Hill Farms, etc. And so, as you may remember, when we went through the planning framework to build the framework, we acknowledged that the planning framework, in order to move around the city every decade, we would not be able to go in as great of detail as some of our older plans did. As you might know, we had 70+ plans. Some of them go into a great detail, others don't. There's not only a high level of detail, but also a huge variety in what the recommendations of these plans have. And one big reason for the framework, as we approach 300,000 people in Madison, and we know we need to get around the city quicker and more efficiently and more equitably, is that acknowledgement that we will not be able to encompass a high level of detail in the new area plans. So the question is, where to draw those lines? On one end of a spectrum, we can imagine that once this West area plan is done, all of these multicolored plans underneath it that have been done over the past couple of decades would simply be archived or retired and no longer relevant. That's one end of the spectrum, and the city would move forward with just one plan for an area. And I think a lot of folks see that as a good, clean way to move forward. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we want to acknowledge a lot of the work and time, effort, expectation that were built up around these older plans or previous plans. So that's sort of setting the table of what we've been grappling with as a staff team, with input from certainly the Plan Commission, the mayor, and many others. So we have been reviewing these underlying plans and recognizing that we can include many city-specific, many specific actions where the city does have control over what happens. So many of the recommendations in these old plans might still be relevant and might just be reflected in the new area plan. However, we'd like to not bring forward actions where the city doesn't have very much influence over a recommendation. Certainly recommendations that have already been implemented, anything that conflicts with current city policy, not bringing those forward, or when things are adequately covered by existing city policies, such as our zoning ordinance, new in 2013. We want to acknowledge that, we don't need to fixate or focus on that level of detail anymore. That's already covered elsewhere. So we've been, keeping all of these things in mind. Next slide. With the overarching goal of, a clear, brief, comprehensive, and usable area plan in the end. Some of the different kinds of actions that we've been reviewing, some are place-based or physical, clearly a city action. Here's a good example found in the Easttown area plan. Create a tax increment finance district, a TIF district here to fund, and then you can read on and on. So that's one really good example of a place-based, city-controlled action that might be able to move forward within the area plan framework. Next, aspirational goals and recommendations. Some of these are the toughest to grapple with because they're very important to folks involved in the planning process, organizations that we as city staff worked with during plans of any age, really. And they're tough because they're not always, they're not always the city doesn't always control the outcome to the extent that folks might hope that the city can. So a good example of that here is to set aside specific areas for certain types of housing aimed at small scale owner occupied housing for wealth building, et cetera, specifically to increase homeownership in BIPOC households. That's Black, Indigenous, people of color households. And so it's a very important goal for the city, not entirely achievable by the city. And then the last, recommendations in older plans or recent plans that aren't city actions. And this is one example of that, exploring the creation of a new business association. That's something that happens in the private or nonprofit sector, not necessarily city driven. And so that, these are some of the things that we're grappling with, and I want for each of the planning teams. So Ben and Linda will talk through the West area plan, some specifics, and then Lisa, who's on the Northeast area plan team with Dan and others, will talk through the Northeast area plan so that you can see some of these tangible examples that we're grappling with at this point and provide some of your input on how best to move forward.
Thanks, Heather. I'll dive into the West area plan summary here. So as Heather mentioned, if there are underlying plans that, we feel as, staff and obviously as Plan Commission, ultimately the council, we can absorb recommendations that remain and other recommendations might fall by the wayside for the variety of reasons that Heather listed. We would consider archiving or retiring those plans. If plans are not archived, the city would follow recommendations in the area plan, the comprehensive plan, if they differ with those older plans. And so as we reviewed underlying plans for the West area plan, We thought with those reviews that there are 3 pretty solid candidates for archiving, those actually being the 3 older plans, Spring Harbor, Southwest, and Midvale Westmoreland. Southwest and Midvale Westmoreland only partially overlap the West area. So because our engagement and outreach focus has been on West area, reaching West area residents and businesses, we felt it would be most appropriate to just retire those plans or archive those plans within the West area boundary and continue with that discussion for the other overlapping portions when we get to those areas. We also thought that it might be or likely would be something to pursue archiving for University Hill Farms, which was stopped in 2016. However, obviously that's a little bit more recent, adopted after the 2013 zoning code, has some additional design guidance. And so one of the questions that we're kind of grappling with is, to what extent, if we do try to archive that plan, we would absorb or pull up design recommendations from that plan into the West area plan. And another thing that we're discussing as relates to the Odana area plan, obviously that's the most recent plan adopted within this West area. And because of that, there are, I guess, two different schools of thought. One being that 95% of the strategies and actions in this plan are still appropriate, relevant, and oftentimes appropriate and relevant to an area, the larger West area, not just the Odana area. And so do we want to absorb those for the whole West area or maintain the Odana area separately and end up with kind of parallel actions and recommendations in many cases? On the other hand, obviously it was just adopted pretty recently. There's a fair amount of outreach and work and buy-in in the community and creating that plan. And so if we pursue archiving and absorbing actions and recommendations, is that kind of at odds with the very recent work that's been conducted. So I guess with that, I will, that's just kind of additional animation to go with what I just talked about, but I will pass it along to Lisa, I think, to talk a little bit about Northeast considerations.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, so I'll go over some of the things we've been talking about for archiving plans in the Northeast area. So we have 6 plans. We have the Easttown Neighborhood Development Plan, the Carpenter Ridgeway, then Ridgewood, the Hanson Road Neighborhood Development Plan, the Greater Easttown Area Plan, and then Hawthorne-Truax, with Hawthorne-Truax just being recently adopted, and then the Greater Easttown Plan being adopted in 2021. The remaining plans are, quite a bit older than that. And it does look like maybe if you forward the slide, Ben, there might be a graphic that might show up. There it is. All right. So, so basically we are planning at this time to basically retire all of the plans in this area with the exception of the Hawthorne-Truax plan. So a lot of those recommendations were written, while the area plan discussions were ongoing, and we knew we were going to be kind of shifting the approach to how we write the recommendations. So a lot of those are actually being carried over in the individual chapters in the Northeast Area Plan. And then any remaining recommendations that might be more like a soft recommendation, we're going to bring into the Community Action Strategy chapter. So that's the community development block grant areas that are eligible for that funding. And there's just a little bit more opportunity to implement some of those recommendations. So we do plan to either incorporate recommendations from the Hawthorne-Truax plan into the individual plan chapters, and then any ones that don't fit into those would be brought into that Community Action Strategy chapter. I think in kind of relating to Ben's discussion on the Odana area plan, I think the Greater Easttown area plan, we're facing kind of similar challenges where there are some recommendations that are maybe a little bit more specific to how that Greater Easttown area might redevelop with the mall. So that's something that we've been working through, where we are bringing over kind of those like location specific city actions But there are some broader citywide goals. There was a lot of focus on equity, for example, in the Greater Easttown Area Plan that, they aren't always city controlled or project specific recommendations. And what we're kind of leaning towards is maybe discussing some of those things in like the text of the plan and acknowledging them as being, significant or priorities and things like that, but they might not result in a specific recommendation in the plan, but still at least documenting that we heard that from the community during that process. That's what I have.
Okay, so that is it in terms of your presentation on this. I have a clarifying question. I'm interpreting that when you say archive, that equals retire. Is that correct?
Yes, sorry, yep.
Okay, and that in both of those cases, any of the recommendations that are in those plans would not be looked at or considered going forward. Am I understanding that correctly, Heather?
I think for the purposes of the Plan Commission, yes, that we would be clearly stating that, the new area plan would guide Plan Commission decisions. Now, in some cases, when the city is not the lead on something, there might still be relevant recommendations in older or more recent plans to our community partners, such as the school district or, technical college or nonprofit organizations or business associations. They might still find relevance in older plans besides the area plans for things that they could take on and recognize that, the city generally supported those things in the year that those plans were adopted. That's, so the plans are archived and that, they're still there, they're still findable, but we want to, get to a sense of clarity that the area plans will be what the Plan Commission would look to for guidance when making their decisions.
Commissioner Heck. Oh, I'm sorry, Heather, I didn't mean to cut you off. Were you going to say
that's
something
fine.
else?
Go ahead.
Okay. Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. I was interested in the last topic that Heather was talking about, and I guess I look at it in particular. I think you called them aspirational goals and things that are in these older plans that the city doesn't have direct control over, and I think that's kind of what you were referring to just now. I guess I feel like there's an opportunity for not just those items, but some of the other older goals and strategies to be recognized, I guess, and kind of given to the stakeholders of the area, and let's say of the sub area plan that helped draw up that plan. Oftentimes, because it was generally empowered people, it's neighborhood associations. And I mean, it might be a lot of work for staff. I don't know, you'll have to tell me, but could some of those items be given back to the neighborhood associations and the stakeholders that created those older plans? And it's like, the planning process has changed, and this is what we're focusing on now. And we don't want these recommendations to go away, but we're going to kind of give them back to you. Does that make sense? Or would that be a tremendous amount of work to pull apart everything in the older plans that are being retired?
I guess I'll start, but I would look to my colleagues Linda and Bill, who are here as well, if they have some input on this. I think that that is one great idea. I mean, and also on top of that, or instead, we can also set, we can also have appendices that really highlight, hey, we heard a lot of this back in 2008 or 2020 when this plan was adopted. You know, I don't know. I don't know what the best way forward is on that, but I like that idea of, you know, giving back and letting folks take and run with certain recommendations from the past. I don't know, Linda or Bill, if you have a perspective on that to share.
Linda?
Sure, thank you. And I apologize, my camera and my computer does not work, so I won't have that on today. But I appreciate the discussion and the question, and I think it is a great opening to help us help guide us as we move forward with this, because one of the things that we really think is critically important is to communicate with the community on how we're doing this, because there are, many people that are still out there who put a lot of time and energy into these underlying plans. We want to make sure people know, that we did a very, very detailed analysis, as we began with the West area and the Northeast area of all of these plans. And I looked at each and every recommendation, and carefully considered through the process that Heather described whether or not we could pull them up into the area plans, retire the recommendations themselves, retire the plans entirely. So that's something that we are still needing to work on, is that communication strategy. How do we do that in the best way possible? And so your ideas, I think, are important to that process as we move forward. One of the things we had thought about doing was, having clearly on our webpage that here are the plans that, fed into these area plans. Here are the plans that have been archived. So those plans are still there. There's still reference materials. But then also, we do regularly communicate with groups that were involved, and we, are certainly going to continue nurturing those relationships and continuing to, where it's relevant, to work with these groups as well for implementing the plans, where it's relevant for the city to be involved, if we can have a facilitator role. But again, that communication strategy is something that we're still going to be working on.
Bill? Did you have
Thank you. I just really quickly wanted to add on to what Linda was saying about the communication strategy, because one thing that we admittedly have never really done a very good job of as a city is communicating back to the neighborhoods once the plans were adopted as to what's been done. And I would say a tremendous number of these recommendations have been implemented, as I think it said in the staff memo, either by ordinance or updated policies, or, sometimes with those community partners themselves. So, yeah, Commissioner Heck, I think that is an opportunity to go back to the neighborhoods where where there are active neighborhood associations with the capacity to do that, and say, hey, we did this plan a decade ago, working with you, and all these things have been done. We're still working on some of the things and updating it with these new area plans, but these are some of the things that maybe haven't been fully implemented yet, that aren't squarely in the city's wheelhouse. And we just want to feed that back to you for your consideration of how those might be able to move forward if it's something you're still interested in.
Commissioner Solheim?
Sorry. Thank you. Actually, Linda anticipated my question about asking if these, if retired plans would still be on the website. So thank you for that. I know we'll get to this. I'm in favor of retiring all the plans that were prior, and not to say that to be dismissive in any sense of their value and all of the work that went into them. That comes purely from a point of clarity and consistency. And one thing I was thinking about is, Bill is just talking about what has been done on those prior plans. And if there is an opportunity for the prior plans, like the Odana area plan in particular, as a recent one, to have, a cover sheet on the plan on the website that clarifies, this was retired, but all of this, effort and work fed into this plan. And actually some of these things were already accomplished at that point. And I can see that staff is already doing tremendous work going through these plans in details with these huge tables of, what is going on to the new area plan, what is not. And it seems like if you're doing that work of some of these things have been accomplished, that could be communicated as well. And when the plan is either retired or whatever we decide to do. So just a thought on how that could be communicated.
So maybe links to those retired plans or
Yeah, and like so if someone went to that retired plan in the website, they wouldn't be misled into thinking it was still active. It would have an explanation of why it was retired and where they can go for the current information, how it fed into it. So there's not a feeling, oh, I participated in this and all of that is lost.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's my concern too. So much work went into these. Alder Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to agree with Commissioner Solheim. I would like to see that they be retired. I completely understand the work that has been put into these plans, but from a standpoint of just making it easier for residents when they're trying to understand what we as a commission are looking at and trying to make decisions off of, if they're having to go to this plan and then they have to look at this plan to try to connect the two pieces and see what we're trying to decide, it just makes it more challenging for them. I think having links on the website would be fine for the retired or archive plans, but I think it would just be much more beneficial to residents if there's the West plan and the Northeast plan, that is what they are looking at when they're trying to review stuff.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Figueroa Cole.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'm going to repeat what I have been said on regards to the efforts put into this plan, but I'm just going to move my comments to the other extreme of the equation here. I don't have the exact words that I wanted, formulated in my head without being too blunt, but it is also a bit frustrating to deal with something in your area and being bucketized into a plan that is 20 years old. Like, what about the people that are here today? What about the people that did not have a say on these plans? So I would like to have a very clear cutoff time. For example, maybe perhaps based on the census, every 10 years, we have a census that tell us the changes in population and the changes of density on the specific areas on the city. So those are opportunities for us to review and to archive plans. So any plan that is older than 10 years, with all the changes that we actually saw on this last census, should be considered for archiving, because there's a very good chance that the population in those areas had changed, or the people that perhaps put those plans together are not there anymore, or the vision for the neighborhood was the vision for 10 years into the future, and now we're here 10 years and things have changed. So I find some of these very old plans to be extremely exclusionary of the needs of the current situations in some of the neighborhoods. So this is why I supported the broader zooming out of these from the little area plans into the bigger areas. I think it makes it a more cohesive way to make decisions. It brings that entire community closer together. We're finding common goals across the entire sector, not just that neighborhood or that other neighborhood. That's really was at the core of these initiating these plans, to be more I wouldn't want to use the word predictable, but just to be more community oriented, on the sense of broadening out our lines of neighborhoods and community, not just giving so much control to areas in our city that have more formalized processes, resources, time, or whatever, but just to be more equitable to people that don't have that kind of access to our processes. So I am definitely for retiring those plans and focusing on the larger plan, but to be to also not lose sight of recent processes like the Odana plan. I will say anything that is over 10 years that is aligned with the census numbers or whatever, or with the comprehensive area plan reviews, I think it's also 10 years, we should archive. That's what I feel about this.
Thank you. Commissioner Shepherd.
Yeah, this is for Heather or anyone else, but I'm just wondering, were there other cities that have gone through this process already that you maybe looked at that provided sort of a model? And if there were there any sort of good or bad lessons learned? Again, archiving plans and that sort.
Yeah, this is where I might look to Brian Grady for this one, not to put anyone on the spot, but I know we did look at 4 or 5 cities that had exemplary planning frameworks when we were working with you over the course of, a couple years back now on developing this. The details are fuzzy to me as far as this exact issue, like archiving or retiring former plans. So I'm not sure that we'll have a good answer, but I guarantee we've looked at a lot of cities to figure out good examples for what the new plans should look like and thinking about what they might contain. Brian, was there any detail we found on the process to archive former plans to your recollection?
And that's a great question, Commissioner Shepherd. And with a little bit of research, we could probably find our notes from when we did talk to those 5 or 6 cities. Maybe potentially Linda Horvath has better memory than I do. I do know that, so up in Minneapolis, the community that I had spoken with, they did basically retire their underlying sub-area plans, at least for development review purposes, when they went to a different system, which basically has a future land use map and a built form map, kind of like the shape of development. Right. So they did make that switch there. And the other, we looked at Denver. Austin comes to mind, but I'm forgetting the details of how those other cities handled it. Maybe other colleagues have better recollection. Otherwise, we could come back with that information in the next round when we come back with these area plans with the experiences from other communities.
It looks like Bill has something to say about it. Bill Fruehling.
Yeah, I was just going to say my recollection, because we not only looked at other communities' plans, but we also talked to some of their staff and about transitioning to some, like this kind of area plan like we're doing now. And I do remember discussions with the planners in Denver about them. I don't know if it uses the same terms, but retiring their plan. So once they did an area plan, that was the plan.
Thank you, Bill. Did you have anything else, Commissioner Shepherd?
No, except this may be an opportunity for a research paper or book. I don't know. If we're breaking ground here in terms of, again, sort of how to retire old plans, this could be it. So thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to summarize what I think I've heard, and then people can chime in if I get it wrong or don't agree. I've heard that the general consensus is for continuing as the planners have, going through thoroughly the plans for the areas, incorporating what makes sense given our current structure of doing area plans. And then, what's the term? Archiving the plans. But I also heard to have it, have them accessible, but clearly noted with the fact that it has been superseded essentially. And to the extent possible, to have information about the fact that things have been incorporated in the new plan and that many things have already been implemented that were in these older plans. Is that a reasonable summary of where people are? Okay, I see shakes and thumbs up. Okay. Okay, good. Thank you. Then let's move on to, I think it's the next question has to do with E and G. What's the next question that we have to consider? Currently designated E and GC areas are appropriate solely for employment and commercial development, or should any further E and GC areas be designated as mixed use? So that's employment and general commercial. Do we have any, Commissioner Solheim?
Would it be possible to maybe bring up that map on the, I think I saw on the west side one, I know I have it on my computer, but I'm looking at a million things. That it looked like the research park area was E, and I just wanted to have a brief discussion on that. I know that we've seen recently a mixed use development in Research Park, which is now, I think, in purple there, but wondering if there's been any discussion about any other parts of that being mixed use.
I
Ben?
can, yeah, I
Yeah.
can take that question. So yeah, our approach kind of for land uses south of Mineral Point Road and that Odana area plan boundary was to really carry forward the recommendations for land use from the Odana area largely. And those recommendations did make a pretty substantial change from employment to mixed use along the Mineral Point Road corridor. But actually, you know, even just very recently, we have heard from Research Park that they would likely be interested in even expanding that mixed use further into the current employment area. And so very timely question. And so that could be something to, you know, integrate into the commission's deliberations and feedback here this evening about to what extent we could or should do, could or should expand mixed use further into Research Park. I know, just to mention kind of as staff, some of our considerations are, especially as we get further south in Research Park, the way the park was laid out for employment uses, we start to get pretty far away from like park amenities. And one of the things that we did in the Odana area of the plan is we shifted other portions of the Odana area to mixed use, was to have some additional like future park overlay areas to designate, you know, that we need to provide services and amenities to potential new residents. And also we have some planned future streets to kind of break up the very large curvilinear blocks that we have in Research Park. So I think potentially implementing some additional street connections to go with additional mixed use would be another consideration to take into account. But yes, overall, absolutely looking for the commission's feedback on that and other employment and general commercial areas.
And is this, are we talking about just the west and north plan, or are we talking about this going forward then? Just to.
Well, I think it would be a consideration as we move forward with other area plans as well, to what extent we want to transition employment and commercial to mixed use. We, I think, want to try to the extent possible avoid a situation where we keep areas in general commercial and employment, but then in reality and implementation, they end up being approved as mixed use projects. Why not just designate them as mixed use up front and be more clear with, you know, our intentions, and that'll allow us to plan for making sure we have enough things like parks and park space.
Which we definitely have done that in the past. Commissioner Solheim, did you have follow-up or further questions?
I just wanted to add thank you that I'd be supportive of looking at that in the next iteration. I was particularly thinking along Whitney Way, where now, Westgate is redeveloped, and then the other research park one at Mineral Point is being developed with mixed use. It'd be nice to have a little bit more of a connection of that in that area.
Thank you. Commissioner Heck.
Excuse me. Thank you. I don't really feel equipped to go, parcel or collection of parcels throughout the city or even in the area plans to make a judgment on each little area. But I would say that I generally favor moving to mixed use when it seems most appropriate in our current office climate and such. Mixed use seems more appropriate given the housing shortage too, unless there's some reason that staff thinks it's not appropriate.
Other comments on this question? I would have to say I agree with both Commissioner Solheim and Commissioner Heck in terms of the specifics of Commissioner Solheim and then the broader look of Commissioner Heck. I mean, I do think we should be moving more toward mixed use in general. So in my mind, if there's a question of whether it should be employment or general commercial or mixed use, I would say do it mixed use then. Other comments, input? Yes, Alder Duncan.
I agree 100% with you, Chair Zellers and Commissioner Heck and Solheim, that when we're looking at this, especially where we are at a point that a lot of buildings and office spaces are becoming empty because people are working from home, that with the situation we have right now in the city of needing more housing, more apartments, more affordable housing, that wherever we can change employment to mixed use, I would be 100% in support of that.
Okay, can I get just an indication from people if you're in agreement with that, General? Okay. Okay, very good. Then moving on to building heights, the general question. And Heather, are you taking that or who's taking that?
We all might pop in here. So I think there are two questions. Since we touched on this a little bit on Thursday, and we heard a little bit of discussion about the question of, well, why have building heights at all? And I think we had just started that discussion. So, I think building heights are a good proxy for the level of intensity that's expected to be allowable on a site. And I think that there's a lot of, sometimes there's some gray area, folks come in and apply for approval for something slightly higher than what the plans recommend. But I think that in general, it would be difficult to just have absolutely no knowledge of what that height framework was across the city. I think we as staff might really struggle with regard to setting expectations for developers, for residents, et cetera. But heights matter more some places than they do others. And what I guess what I can say along those lines is that, when you look at surrounding land uses that are likely going to be there for a long time and aren't, high priority redevelopment areas, there's just a basic urban design desire to make sure that, we're not seeing 2 stories right adjacent to 10-story buildings. If there are narrow streets or wide streets, sometimes that plays into the building height desires as well. So there are some basic just urban design sort of factors that we think about when we think about height recommendations in proximity to different land uses and on different street networks, et cetera, that I think lend themselves well to the plans having some recommendations on building height. But I do think there are areas where we don't know exactly what that upper limit should be or could be and what the market might support. So there's the general question of whether we should include building heights in the plans. And I think the staff recommendation would be, yes, in certain areas, let's include that as a general framework for staff, for residents, for developers to follow. But then the other question that came up a little bit earlier this evening is, do we want to expand the way height works in the downtown area? So height is not only in the plan, but it's in our zoning code. We have absolute sort of limits on height that can only be exceeded through plan development, or now the number of stories can be exceeded if one includes affordable housing, a certain amount of affordable housing. If we want to expand that mechanism outside of the downtown, then we would need to have some areas, not the whole city, but some areas with mapped building heights in the zoning code. So that's the distinction. I think it's very common to see height recommendations in our plans. And that's where, the conditional use often comes in. You're looking at the plan recommendation and considering that. But when a height is made more rigid, I'll say, within the city's zoning code, that provides, even more predictability and maybe the opportunity to use that height as a tool to incentivize affordable housing and other potential items. So that's where I'll kick it off, and I'll look to other colleagues to see if anyone has any additions.
I would just like to say, I really like the idea of using the height both for a mechanism for more affordable housing and for really substantial sustainability kinds of items like the geothermal or solar or whatever. So that's where I would come from on that. I'm not seeing any raised hands. Commissioner Solheim.
Sorry. I guess I have a question, and maybe this is still being decided, but you mentioned in certain areas. So would you look to putting in building heights in specific areas where you want to see or guide? I'm thinking like around East Town, where we have the East Town plan and along East Wash. It seems like it would make sense there, but I'm thinking both of, staff time and also not knowing, do we really want to commit to a certain height in some areas versus others where we know there's going to naturally be more development pressure. So I guess I'm wondering how you would approach that from certain nodes where we would map it or throughout the area plan.
I think Ben, would you bring up and maybe speak to the West area early draft map?
Sure, 1 second. So our approach, at least thus far for the West area, as we kind of touched on during the Thursday meeting, was to only map maximum building heights for areas that do not have that guidance in the comprehensive plan. And so that's high residential, regional mixed use, general commercial, employment areas. So I guess, that really, I suppose, gets at the heart of the question you're asking, Commissioner Solheim. If we did want to map it for just these select areas or do something for the entire planning area, I think you're right in that if we expanded it even further than this, that obviously probably exponentially increases the amount of time, effort, potential controversy, I would imagine, with implementation. So I don't know. I mean, we could shift how we're pursuing this if that's kind of the consensus, but I think another aspect is, whether or not we were to proceed with implementing this through the zoning code or not. That's a big piece of the puzzle as well, and I think probably where the bulk of the work and controversy would arise.
Mm-hmm. I'll just say, I mean, I think this approach is very logical. I would add, just to have kind of like everything on one page, I would note the current comprehensive plan height limits for those other districts that aren't mapped, just for ease of absorbing this, versus having to go back to that to see it. But this makes sense to me.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other insights, input, comments? Commissioner McCahill.
Yeah, thanks. I guess I sort of hinted at this in our discussion last evening, that I don't know, it doesn't feel entirely intuitive to me. I understand now the reasons why we would want height limits in the area plans. I think the piece I'm just wrestling with is deciding what those should be in this context. I mean, we were talking about East Wash earlier, and everybody was kind of like, yeah, why not more building height? But then there's all these considerations like, do we want to offer height bonuses at some point for this and that reason? And so it just feels like a lot to put our stamp on at this sort of bird's eye view.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. Heather, I've probably asked this question many times, but can you remind us if, we put these heights in the comprehensive plan, and they're not necessarily going to be in the zoning code too, unless that's proactively done. And if a development proposal comes forward, you'd assume the zoning code and the comprehensive plan would be in sync, but do we have to specify that conditional uses would be allowed to exceed the height maps? And how do we fit in bonus stories and things like that? I'm a little confused about the intersection, I guess, of zoning and the comprehensive plan in this regard.
Yeah, great question. Let's go back just in our minds to downtown and how it does work in the downtown area. And I'll reference again the downtown plan, and Bill Fruehling, jump in anytime. So the downtown plan has maximum height recommendations throughout the central downtown area. Those were then, within a year, those were codified or put into the zoning code as height maximums throughout the whole downtown that exactly matched the recommendations within our downtown plan. That step, creating the zoning height maximums, is what really sets up the predictability. You can't just apply for a conditional use to exceed those zoning maximums. In the downtown, the only path to exceed those is to basically rezone the site to a planned development, which you'll see at an upcoming meeting, and you have seen in the past. So just because a maximum height is mentioned in the comprehensive plan or a sub-area plan doesn't necessarily mean that an applicant can't come in with something 1 or 2 stories higher, make the case for a conditional use, and the Plan Commission could grant that. And you have. There have been many examples of that the Plan Commission has considered conditional use requests when perhaps a 5-story comes in an area recommended for a maximum of 4 or something like that. now one of the latest tools that we've tried to utilize is this incentive wherein a developer can put in additional stories, still equaling that same height cap that is otherwise, is otherwise set, but they can weave in additional stories into that building in return for the commitment for a certain amount of units that are affordable for the long term. So that's playing out downtown. I guess one thing I'm suggesting is that in order to have that mechanism, that paradigm outside of our cities downtown, we would have to have zoning heights be part of the equation. And so, another possibility instead of zoning would be to reflect those heights in an urban design district, like we have in the Cap East district. All of that property that's redeveloped to 12 and 14 stories, the vast majority of it's in the traditional employment district where anything over 5 stories requires a conditional use. Were it not for that very prescriptive, predictable urban design district that sets the 8, 12, 14-story height limits, each of those sites would have probably been quite a conundrum, to basically get approved. And as you remember, a lot of those went extremely smoothly because there was such strong buy-in and a lot of predictability on what those maximum heights would be.
So just a quick follow-up question is, if we put heights in the comp plan for some of these areas or land use categories, is it really providing one impact is it's providing the rationale for zoning, future zoning ordinance changes, because it needs to be in the zoning code to really have an impact, right?
Yes. So here's what I'll suggest, and I want to use the Easttown and Odana area plans that were recently adopted as a good example. Within those plans, we have future land uses, we had future streets, and we chose the highest priority future streets and the most important land use and zoning issues, and we did proactive rezoning of certain sites and proactive official mapping to map those key future streets to really be the bones of those future neighborhoods. We could do something similar where there are key redeveloping corridors like along the BRT or something, where we could say, it's important enough here to take these height recommendations and get them in the zoning code. And that would be a separate action later as an action to implement that portion of the area plan. And I think it would work best, again, looking at my colleagues here for anybody who might want to step in. But look, I think those things would work best if they're flagged and made transparent in the plan itself. And so on the adopted land use and height map, you would probably, a way to do it would be to have a note. These areas should be, the height should be set in zoning with a future action of the Plan Commission and Council. That way it wouldn't be a surprise later on. It would be an implementation step for that plan.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful.
Bill came on it. Bill, do you have anything to?
Sure. And like when we did the downtown plan and mapped the heights, some of you remember that before our current zoning code, basically any new development was a planned development. It was a negotiated thing and it was a long drawn out process. And we looked at the downtown area and said, well, there are urban design reasons to map heights. It might be, maybe it's view corridors, maybe it's the characteristic of the street, how wide it is, maybe it's adjacent land uses, maybe it's the topography, of the site. And so we decided then to take the approach of mapping heights as an urban design function, because right now, and the the height limits in pick a zoning district, whether it doesn't matter where that zoning district is in the city, it could be on the far east side, it could be on the far west side, it could be on the south side. The height limit is still the same, but the context of those sites are, are often very different. And so I think what we've been talking about in these area plans is, we could map everything in those areas, but really going with the heights that are associated with their given zoning districts, except for some special cases where a more nuanced approach to height might be necessary, or those instances where the zoning district doesn't have a height limit stated, that maybe through this process we recognize the context of some sub areas within our bigger planning area that might need a little further guidance, if that makes sense.
Okay, I've found this very helpful. Other comments from commissioners?
And Commissioner Zellers, if I can just chime in.
Sure,
just
go
with-
ahead.
With a perspective. What we do include in our one of our comprehensive plan recommendations is to map outside of the downtown, map heights, whether it's in plans or ordinances. And so I think this is an implementation of that idea. I think one thing too is we're kind of these plans, these 12 area plans will be part of the comprehensive plan generalized future land use map, but we're kind of flipping how we're flipping our approach here. With the comp plan we did in 2018, we were trying to map these different categories, for the residential, low, medium, high. We're trying to map those areas, show where we want different intensities across the city. But the comp plan, because it covers the whole city, the categories, the ranges for number of stories, the density ranges are very wide. They're trying to really cover a wide variety of scenarios across the city, whether, from the Near East Side, Cap East District, out to the mall that we'll be redeveloping later. So it's trying to capture more things. But I think now with these area plans, we want to provide more, we want to describe more what we want. And so I think having these heights in here that provide a little more detail than these wide ranges in the comp plan will be helpful. I think staff just sees a lot of benefit of providing more predictability. We can basically kind of, as a city, show our work as to where we want to put intensity. Commissioner McCahill, yes, I think it is tough. These are very large areas, and to kind of have like a microscope, use a microscope and think about building heights at such a wide scale, I think is difficult. I think it's up to us as staff to kind of more so, again, show our work. Why are we showing 12 in a certain area, 14 somewhere else, 8, 6 somewhere else? And so we need to provide information, not only to the Plan Commission, but also just the community in general. So like, for example, next to the CUNA site, north side of Mineral Point Road, I heard the West team talking about why they were proposing certain heights. And they're looking at the thing about topography. Okay, the topography of the north side of Mineral Point Road falls off to the north. There's a single family neighborhood behind that. Maybe we don't go with a very tall building that would shade the southern sun in the winter, for example. So there's a lot of factors that you'd want to include in this. BRT stops, access to parks, like Ben mentioned. So I think that a lot of staff would appreciate, and I think that hopefully the community will appreciate more predictability in terms of where we want to focus the intensity. We can describe the why, and really the time to talk about heights and intensity is during this area plan process when we're working with the entire community, all stakeholders for these areas, rather than reacting as part of a proposal down the line. So it's really the upstream versus the downstream. And we think there's a better way for everyone involved. So we can kind of have that discussion, the dialogue. Maybe we're within plus or minus 2 stories. Maybe it's not perfect, but I think if we can provide more information on what the plan intensity is for those heights, hopefully the Plan Commission would follow through when a development proposal comes through, to follow through and say, hey, we thought that 12 stories made sense, or that 6 stories made sense. So we need the Plan Commission, the overall city policymakers to follow through. And if we find an area that we think is wrong, we made a mistake, we think that something should be different, then we'll make that change when the area plan's updated 10 years from now. So we have that quick kind of reoccurrence for areas that we can revisit different changing scenarios. But there's a lot of support for this because I think it's just overall predictability for everyone involved, staff, plan commission, community, alders. We want to provide more of that up front. And if we don't, you look at the ranges, high residential is from 4 to 12 stories, and that just doesn't tell you much. And so then it really just kind of wild west of what the city's expectation is for development in different areas.
Thank you, Brian. Alder Figueroa Cole.
So, I mean, I don't know if I'm grasping all this information, a lot of good information. I'm gonna have to watch this meeting again, but maybe at some point, I think I heard that, here, I don't mind. I think I love the idea of giving the transparency of or the visual, not transparency, but the visual of what things could be in the future, with adding those numbers. But I don't want to have the confusion of this is what we want versus what is already on the zoning codes. I don't want to leave that to council to say, okay, this is what planning suggested, and some council approved that it's going to be 14 stories, but it's not on the zoning code, so we have to actually change the ordinance to make it then 14 stories later. Like I would like to have whatever is available today on the zoning code be then prescribed into the map, but not if things are going to not be in sync with the zoning code, I wouldn't be comfortable with that because I would just create more confusion and irritation. And then you put that in the hands of 20 people to make a decision based on whatever circumstance that is at the moment. So that's kind of like, if I'm trying to put all this together on conditional use versus by right, and how the zoning impacts connects with the area plan, I would like to have one message, not two different answers or path to get to where we need to be. And then there was something else I was going to say there about something that a comment, but I lost it. But
maybe
but
Heather
yeah, I feel like
could
I'm sorry.
respond to maybe Heather could respond to that first concern that you expressed.
Okay, maybe I misunderstood that, the part about being in sync, or the part about Heather, can you just explain that if I get that right? We'll put it
Yeah,
we
no,
put the
I-
high here, but then we go back later and make it official on the ordinance. Like, how does that really work?
Well, that would be so after the plan is adopted, one of the implementation steps could be to go back with a zoning ordinance that would create a new height map for, I'm going to use East Town Mall as an example, or the stretch of East Washington Avenue near East Town Mall. And that would set a zoning height maximum, just like we have in the downtown area for that stretch. Now, I wanted to say something that I think was really important in what you just raised. I think we as staff are really on the lookout to make sure we're not suggesting height maximums that are lower than what the zoning code already allows by right. So, for instance, if our zoning code allows 4-story buildings in a certain zoning district, we're not going to suggest a 3-story maximum height in this area. So I want to assure you that yes, staff is taking that into account. What we're really dealing with are the zoning districts that have a sky is the limit. They don't have any upper maximum height within those zoning districts, like the regional mixed use, even the traditional shopping street, traditional employment. Those really don't have any maximum heights that come with them. And so in those areas, it might make sense to add something similar to what Minneapolis has, kind of the building form companion to the underlying zoning. But I hear what you said about not creating new conflicts, and we do have our eyes open to make sure we don't do that.
Yeah, I wasn't worried about you going down for sure. I was just going like the zoning will say 6 stories or whatever, and then we're suggesting 8 or 10 or what, or 12. Like if we're going to make a change to be higher heights and that is already on the zoning code, that should come together with an ordinance change from the get-go. Like the same the same council that approved the plan, then take responsibility for changing the ordinances, not, not passing the bucket to somebody else and creating that new conflict on with new people and things like that. That's what I was kind of getting at on that regard. Yeah, and the other thing totally went over. I forgot, but it will come back to me. I'm definitely a very. I don't have a opinion at this moment because I feel like I still have so many questions and I can wrap my head around all of this. But I will definitely watch this recording again and come back to staff maybe for a meeting 101 and answer my basic questions. I feel like there's some basic building steps, that I'm missing and I cannot connect the dots that clearly in my head.
Okay, thank you, Alder. Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. I'm interested in understanding if we were to establish some new height bonuses for some areas, and it regardless of what the bonus consists of, or the rationale for it, is that something that would need to be in the zoning code, I assume? Would there also need, in your opinion, need to be reference to it in the area plans?
Not necessarily. I mean, if one were to assume that this is a citywide opportunity generally, wherever height maximums exist, then I don't think it would need to show up in each and every area plan. On the other hand, if it's only in bus rapid transit station areas or something, then we might want to reflect those. So I guess I can say it depends.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Alder Figueroa Cole.
I remember. Okay. Okay, so to the point made earlier or a minute ago about using these area plans to make these determinations, now that we put in all this work into the area plans, as one fellow alder explained this process to me at the very beginning, how zoning worked. So how do you justify making some of these decisions now based on 2 area plans when any zoning change that you make now, here will impact the entire city? You know what I mean? Like how do we balance that? Because it's not just changing the zoning code for the west area plan and the north side area plan. It's just like any other, any changes that you make to areas in these area plans will also impact land that we don't have area plans for yet. You know what I mean? Am I thinking that correctly? Like we're making decisions for future people, no? Right?
I see that Ben has his hand up to reply.
Yeah, I think I know what you're referring to. And I think actually if we do something along the lines of height maximums as we do in the downtown, we would actually be implementing it probably area by area based on the recommendations contained within those area plans. So I think we could do that kind of one area at a time, and it would not necessarily end up impacting the rest of the city because it would be an implementation measure in response to an adopted area plan.
So it would be like a new layer type of thing, like you will have a layer, an overlay or whatever for just those area plans?
Something
Or
similar
new
to that.
code?
So when we move on to like southeast or southwest, we could have a similar consideration as part of those area plans as to mapping, maximum building heights. I think by that time we would kind of have a, more of an idea of how to progress through that because we're working through some of these issues right now. But it seems to me that it would be kind of pursued on an area by area basis as we undertake those planning efforts, and we wouldn't be changing something necessarily for the whole city just through these 2 current area plan processes.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
I am going to try to summarize this, but feel free if I don't get it right, as I know you would, to chime in. What I think I'm hearing is people are comfortable with planners going ahead with the heights as they've described them. And there seems to be interest in indicating in the plan that there's a desire to go forward or to explore, I guess I would say, going forward in zoning to have a mechanism that would allow for something that's similar to what has been done in the downtown, to allow for a bonus essentially if there is affordable housing or sustainability factors or maybe something else, but to explore that mechanism. So go ahead with the heights, but then explore a mechanism for encouraging those kinds of things that we want to see happen. Is that fair? If that's what, okay. Okay, very good. Then I think we're ready to move on to the next item. Approach to retaining, integrating non-physical development and or non-city actions feedback. Are any of our staff going to just kind of highlight what we're looking at here? Linda.
Yeah, so I wanted to invite, I can show something, but I wanted to invite Lisa Magnabola because you're dealing with that more directly right now. Did you want to speak to that? Otherwise, I can share something as well.
You can go ahead and go first and I can follow up with, the northeast side.
Sure. So I was just going to share my screen, just one page out of the Hawthorne plan that kind of, I think it really illustrates what we're talking about. So I will just do that. Oh, sorry, I'll take, you wanted me probably to drop my hand and let's see if I can get that. Okay, yeah, so I'll keep talking real briefly here, but I just wanted to show you a page out of the Hawthorne Truax neighborhood plan that was adopted back in March of this year. And so we have this sidebar that we created to show those recommendations that would be implemented by community partners. And this is, I think, something similar to what the Northeast Area Plan team is talking about doing, because they also are working with a CDBG eligible to CDBG eligible areas or community development block grant eligible areas. So when we do a plan that is supported by the CDBG funds, we often do a deeper dive of community engagement. And so during that process, we get to know partners quite well in the area and find out in a kind of maybe more deeper way what those folks are really looking for in the area. And so you can see here with Hawthorne Truax, we did some work with financial institutions. We did a lot of work with East Madison Community Center. And so we learned what those entities could possibly do to meet the hopes and dreams of the community more deeply. And so what we wanted to do going forward with the area plans was to acknowledge that we've heard some things that the community would like to have happen, but that we as a city would not lead. And so this would be one potential way of doing that, is to show those items in the plan, but kind of off to the side. And who would be the implementers off to the side, rather than having those as a part of what the city would do. So this is an illustration of that, and I will stop sharing. And if
Thank you,
Lisa-
Linda. That's very helpful. So the question is, does the commission agree with the approach to integrating non-physical development and non-city actions into area plans? And so this was an example of what kind of thing is being talked about. Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. I wanted to make sure staff had recognized Alder Field's comment on this one, and since he's not able to be here, I'm not sure I totally understand some of his input, but I think he's worried about differences in planning processes and the different area plans not resulting in the same level of attention to a potential sidebar, let's say, as Linda discussed. And also, I mean, he's saying it's going to be a call to action for him to lobby or to push for things that would benefit his constituents that are mentioned in the sidebar, because the city is at least a partial player. Did you all read that, and do you have a
Yes.
reaction to it?
Yeah, no, but thank you for bringing that up. But I do think everybody has had an opportunity to take a look at that, but it definitely comes into play here. Did you have anything else, Commissioner Heck? No. Commissioner McCahill.
Yeah, I think that's a good concern to be considered. I like seeing these. I think for a couple reasons. One is that there are always things that the city cannot do by itself, and so I think it is worth calling those out. I think of funding transportation and all kinds of things that the city can't do it all by itself. But also, I think probably more importantly is it's really helpful context, I think, for as we're looking at what's going on in a neighborhood. If we don't understand the different players and opportunities that are there, I think it's helpful to see those. So maybe a little more nuance in how they're presented, or some vetting to speak to some of the concerns Alderfield raised.
Thank you, Commissioner McCahill. Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. I really appreciate Alderfield's comments on this and agree with Commissioner Cahill. It is kind of a tough call because you hate to sometimes include things that you don't have full control over. At the same time, I think this planning process is a unique opportunity in terms of facilitating a lot of groups together that do not always have the opportunity to provide feedback on what's going on in their neighborhood or their community. And if the plan can be an opportunity to showcase some things that are needed that the city may not fulfill, but that someone else may be able to fulfill, I think this is one opportunity to do that. So I'm in support of it. I agree that I need some workshopping to figure out how it is actually implemented.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I have to say, I agree also with that. Any different input, or are we all on the same page on that? Okay. Then moving on. The next item is approach to future land use mapping for institutions of worship. And the question is the commission comfortable with GFLU maps, general future land use maps, at map edits to change institutions of worship from SI and LR to LMR, MR, NMU, or CMU? And you've all got that on what those are. And okay, I'm seeing thumbs up on that. Any concerns? Or no, it looks like everybody's there. So so that's a comfort level with that. Then the last item is low, medium residential properties. And the question here is basically kind of open-ended. What's the commission's guidance on how to best address the uncertainty for staff, developers, landowners, and residents as to what may be considered appropriate in LMR areas? And this goes back to really the commission's taking out essentially, and if you have your sheets on the questions, it shows that the staff had recommended appropriate that this escalator clause is appropriate in select conditions at up to 70 dwelling units per acre and 4 stories, except for parts of the city with an area plan adopted after the 2023 comprehensive plan interim update. And that was removed from what went through as a comprehensive plan update. So the question is really, given that, since we are doing the area plans, how do we deal with that uncertainty really of what the heights might be because of that escalator? Heather or Ben or whoever, please chime in and try to make that clearer.
I can start, and I think Ben, if you want to bring up the West Area Plan early draft map, one of the things that we're trying to do within the area plan processes is look at all of the low medium residential areas, the LMR areas, and try to make a call based on characteristics of where they are. Are they close to core transit? Are they close to parks? Are they, the variety of things that are in the so-called escalator clause? We're trying to examine those as part of these area plan processes, and in many cases recommend a shift up to the medium residential intensity. And Ben has brought up this map here. You can see that the areas that are shown as MR or medium residential, kind of the mid-brown color, currently today, those are LMR or special institutional. And through this consideration, we as staff have decided to recommend medium residential, so a greater level of intensity. Now, that leaves a lot of the light orange or the LMR areas. They still have the escalator clause that can be considered with them based on the council action last week. However, we have kind of gone through these as a staff and determined that they really are probably best suited for that missing middle housing, the LMR intensities of 2-3 stories, densities of closer to 30 units per acre, really that missing middle, lower scale multifamily housing. And so we just run into a concern moving forward, post adoption of the area plan. How can we grapple with these LMR areas that developers and residents living nearby may still see as areas that we could consider for significantly greater intensity? Maybe it's fine. We just want a little bit more guidance on how to handle that. And Ben, do you have anything to add or clarify there?
Not really. I think that's a good summary of the issue, and just looking for any thoughts or guidance by the commission. If the consensus is to just continue on with things as they are, that is certainly a possibility, but we've just felt that these area plans are kind of an opportunity to provide that additional surety for all the folks that are mentioned in the memo, landowners, residents, staff, policymakers, kind of looking back to what Brian had mentioned, kind of that level of predictability. And if it's not through kind of that area plan clause in the comp plan, perhaps there's another method to achieve that same level of predictability. And so just kind of looking for the commission's thought on the best course of action to get to that point.
And if I can chime in briefly, yeah, going back, predictability. how can we early on as a community to think about what the right intensities are for certain sites. And I'll go back to Alder Figueroa Cole's comments before, demolition ordinance. You were saying these are all just words, and I'm so confused. It's hard to keep track of all this. I've worked for the Plan Division for 17 years. I'm also confused at times, and things are very complicated. I think that unfortunately the clause that the words that were added, before the escalator clause said, in certain areas, generally along arterial streets, we added a bunch of words to that clause. Unfortunately, words are just words and they have different meanings to different people. And so our goal as staff was to remove the escalator. So we're doing an area plan. We're going to focus on 1/12 of the city. We want to think about what are the right intensities for these different LMR sites. The thought was, okay, some might remain LMR, some might go to MR, some might go to something else, a mixed use potentially. But we want to add more predictability, and having a color on a map provides predictability. Having a string of words that talks about access to, I'm sorry, my colleagues, we drafted this language. I signed off on it. I agree with the time, but adding words that says proximity to transit, to urban services, to parks, whatever, those are words that will have different meanings to different people depending on what side of a topic they're on. And so we just think that fortunately, what can work is a color on a map and maybe some heights mapped as well. That will provide more predictability and give staff something to ground their comments to when a developer comes in with a proposal at those early stages. And it gives some staff something to ground their comments on when the adjacent property owners, neighbors, stakeholders ask questions about that. And so in general, setting expectations is a helpful thing no matter what aspect of life it is. And so here I would just, again, advocate for us as a city to do this. Remember, predictability, I think that'll help smooth out things, have discussions early on rather than later as a certain development proposal is proposed. Thanks for the time.
Commissioner Shepherd.
Yeah, Brian, could you just briefly talk about how would this predictability benefit current property owners, individuals living in this area?
That are developing their property or live nearby property up for development?
Or just live nearby. I mean, we've heard, there will be some that would push back against this and would say, this is the city's being too aggressive in that sort in terms of trying to get this predictability. Are there any benefits that they would gain from this?
I think the benefit is that we could hopefully have a conversation as part of an area plan when there's absent a development proposal. And so we can look at these sites like we're doing right now with the Plan Commission. We'd look at a certain site and we would say, okay, we think this is LMR or MR or something else. And we can talk. If people have questions about a site, we can say, staff originally drafted this recommendation, and here's the factors why, whether it's the depth of the lots, the topography, or whatever it might be, access to parks, schools, whatever it might be. We as a city want to apply our land use recommendations based on factors, which we try to do. And so we can do that through an area plan, absent of a development proposal when it's the here and now and it's real. And so if we can have that dialogue with all stakeholders at that early point, absent proposal, when the temperature's a lot lower, I think that will come to a decision. The city will decide on what the recommendation is. And then everyone knows, oh, it's LMR or it's MR or it's MR with this building height on it. They know, everyone knows what it is, including the developer. And so right now when the developer's looking at our categories, and they're always they tend to just propose things a little higher than what the plan might recommend. That's just kind of the common thing. We can also say as a city, well, we had a discussion, we think that X is the right number, whether it's LMR or building height. But you want to do that before there's development proposal, because you want to think about the factors and have an honest conversation about, okay, where are we going to put new residents in the city? And if you're going to put new residents, you put them by a school or by a park. But once a development proposal is there and it's the here and now and it's affecting you, then the conversation is a whole lot different. And so I think that overall, setting expectations earlier is helpful for everyone involved and will just make development less complicated at the city of Madison, hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Commissioner Shepherd. Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. So I'm going to take what Brian just said and see if I can boil it down to my understanding. for the West Area Plan, then what staff is recommending, I think, is that we remove the entire escalator clause, as it's called, a strange name that is, and trust the planning, the process, the area plan process to come up with a land use recommendation for each of those locations in the West Area Plan. Plan Commission is an approving body, not an approving body, but we will make a recommendation to council and we'll for accepting the plan or a modified plan when it comes to us for the West Area. Is that what you said? Is that the practical aspect of what you said?
Yeah, we will, I think so. We'll develop this plan together through a public process with the community. And yeah, you all will recommend this plan to council and council will review it. But overall, the idea is, yeah, providing more predictability in terms of what the city wants and expects in different parts of the city.
So, so on the LMR, then you might come back to us then with it being MR instead, because through this process, or leaving it LMR.
Right now, I feel like with the escalator, what staff was thinking we thought it was a genius idea. But we want more predictability because, it's tough for us as staff to not know what the recommendation is. And so right now with the LMR, with the escalator, you really have a recommendation for LMR or MR. You have a wider range. And so we want to provide more predictability. And so, yes, we would recommend just straight LMR or straight MR or straight NMU, whatever it might be. Now with the West team, they're the test case, and in some cases, yeah, they showed MR, but we want to decide. We want to look at the factors at play: proximity to schools, transit, whatever it might be, and come up with that one color, that one category, rather than a 2-category recommendation.
Yeah.
Because with that string of words, some people will consider transit to be X, and people consider transit to be Y, and so it's not going to add clarity to what the expectation is for a site. People are going to say, well, because of this reason, it should be this. Well, someone's going to say the exact opposite reason, citing those same string of words.
Okay, thank you. Alder Figueroa Cole.
Thank you. So again, I agree with the wordplay situation. I understand that concern, but in my mind, again, the city of Madison is not expanding any wider. There's cities around us that own all that land. So I don't see us buying Verona anytime soon or Fitchburg or whatever. We are not expanding to the size. So that only leave us to grow higher and to continue to build up. So as long as we are going to really put the priorities and the considerations of these changes based on areas that are already established. And that means, again, access to schools, parks, churches, medical facilities, grocery stores, things that we're not going to require to build in order to form a community. Then I'm okay with the idea of not having that escalator clause. But again, just have a paintbrush of putting this color in there and say these are all LMRs or MRs, and not taking into consideration the factors of communities that are already established and sharing the services with new people into those communities, then that will be I wouldn't want to let go of that. The escalator clause will be for me the safety net to ensure that we can use those considerations when making decisions. So I understand the more certainty on these things, but I will, instead of having the starting point being low, medium residential LMRs, I will actually go the other way around. I will say, okay, these are all medium residential, and then move our way down to LMRs for those areas that do not have all those extra facilities or services around the particular sites. Does that make sense? I wouldn't go progressively in this case. If we're going to get rid of the escalator clause, I will go from the top down. Like here's the max, and then whatever areas do not have schools nearby, don't have all those resources available to them, then those areas can be the missing middle, the low residential, or whatever.
I'm not sure, and maybe I'm not understanding either Brian or Alder Figueroa Cole, but my interpretation is essentially that's what staff would be doing. They would be looking to put LMR in MR if those things that you described were
right.
Were there. Am I misinterpreting you, Brian, or?
Yeah, let Ben or Linda convey their review and what they came up with.
I mean, it's I think that we're pretty comfortable with where the future land use map is draft right now. It's just kind of, yeah, coming down on either side of things for LMR versus MR. I mean, it's hard to, given that the comprehensive plan interim update has been approved by council with the plan commission's recommended edit to that clause. I think it's tough to go, fully back to what that clause advocated for, since it's now approved policy that doesn't include that. But that's not to say that we don't have an opportunity to provide more surety in some fashion for these LMR areas and these area plans. And maybe one option is, since we're talking about maximum building heights, is adding those maximum building heights to LMR areas as well, since there is some of that dissonance between 3 and 4 floors. But I think a lot of the considerations as far as what areas are appropriate for LMR versus MR, to a large extent have been accounted for in the current draft. Maybe there's some tweaks here and there that could be made, but I think we've been trying to arrive at that draft, balancing those considerations and needs between MR and LMR as it stands. So kind of a roundabout answer, I guess, but I think I covered some of the issues.
Did you, Commissioner Solheim, did you have anything else, Alder Figueroa Cole, at this point?
No, I mean, again, I understand the frustration, but I just can't discount. I just want to make sure that the recommendations will be prioritize the perks around that development. I mean, yes, community input is important, but it shouldn't overshadow that we don't have to build schools and churches or whatever into these new areas already there. So, and that's, I don't know, that's my concern, that we should maximize the density in areas where the services already are. That should be our priority. That's how I feel about it.
Thank you. Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. Related to that, I was going to say, it's kind of interpreting what Alder Figueroa Cole was saying is kind of what we were talking about earlier with employment and mixed use, is just kind of switching your mindset and not what is employment should go to mixed use, but actually everything should be mixed use. And then let's think about what really needs to be employment or commercial, kind of the same thing here. Actually, let's think of it all as medium residential, and then are there specific spots that should be low medium residential? So I think it's a little nuanced, but it makes a difference in how you're reviewing it. And my other question, which I think was just being touched on, was we talked briefly about just removing the escalator clause, but it's not, the escalator clause is in the comp plan, correct? So it's not like we could remove it just for an area plan. It is for everything. Just want to confirm that.
That is true. I mean, I think that's why we're back. And I wish we could have done these things in another order, but
Yeah.
you know, we may be able to find a path forward to figure this out within the confines of the area plans to make this clear, but we'll have to bring that back to the commission at a future date where we bring the west and northeast area plans back for your consideration.
I mean, not to make it even more confusing, but I was thinking about language of, you know, this escalator clause is, you know, I don't want to say not applicable, but will be scrutinized in areas of this area plan because it was just reviewed and changes were made to reflect change from LMR to MR. You know, it's kind of like you would have to really hit a certain threshold, but I realize that's very subjective.
I think this is still really helpful, and we'll try to bring back kind of the next steps and what we did with this input when we see you next.
Yeah, I don't think there's a super clear path, so we'll look forward to seeing what you do come back with on that. Are there any other comments from commissioners on this topic? I don't see any raised hands. So then that's the last item I believe that we have on this particular topic. I don't see staff raising a hand to say, no, let's do something else. So then we're on to business by members. Any business by members? Alder Figueroa Cole.
I don't have any business, but I forgot to say this on the last meeting. I really want to thank staff for all the work on these two area plans. I think we were so rushed on the last one trying to get out of there by 8. But the fact that pretty much everyone from planning was at the table just shows the dedication and the efforts that they all combined put into this effort. And the amount of community engagement that has been done for this West. I mean, I'm sure the North plan was the same, but I have been on the front road of the West area plan. So I know how much work has been put into being at every site across the city, at Parks Alive, other parks, whatever. They have really done a very good job. So I really didn't want to miss the opportunity to really say thank you and acknowledge all that work.
Thank you, Alder. I think everybody agrees with that on the Plan Commission, and going out in various places and seeing the signs and where you can do the scan to get to, anyway, yeah, great outreach. So, and a lot of work clearly went into it. So thank you, Alder, for saying that. Okay. Other business by members? Then secretary's report, Heather.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to echo this and thank my colleagues for all of the tough work on these two area plans and the framework in general. And thank all of you plan commissioners for getting into the weeds, really sticking with it for another long meeting this evening. So thank you. Really helpful at this stage. Let's see, first, a quick reminder about the annual statement of interest forms. I think we have a really good record here with the Plan Commission, and I'll reach out to you individually if needed on that. The Common Council last week did act along the lines of the Plan Commission recommendations on all of the items, including the comprehensive plan interim update. So that is passed. And looking forward to our January meetings in the new year. January 8th, we'll have the downtown Madison College site, 33 West Johnson Street, a redevelopment of that site, including a rehabilitation of the existing building. And then I'll move on to the January 22nd meeting. There is a 54-unit apartment building proposed along with some townhomes on Schrader Road. That's the first item there on the list. And then I'll move down to the 700 block of East Washington Avenue, a conditional use for a new 14-story mixed-use building with about almost 250 apartment units. And then 929 East Washington Avenue, this is across from Breeze Stevens on the 900 block of East Washington. Another alteration to the approved office and residential building on this site. The new ask is for a 15-story hotel on the 900 block. So those are the main items that we'll have for January, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of December and look forward to seeing you in the new year.
Thank you, Heather. And we acknowledge staff. I want to also acknowledge all of you plan commissioners, because there are some, and have been and will continue to be, some tough topics to grapple with. And I appreciate your review of these things, your thoughtfulness and ideas. So thank you very much for that. And with that, looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Alder Figueroa Cole, seconded by Commissioner Solheim. And I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Motion passes unanimously, and I agree. Have a great rest of the year and see you in January.